Imagine someone roasts you so hard you get sent to another world. Our boy Misumi is an ordinary loser. Suddenly he gets teleported to a mistress who roasts him so hard he gets sent to Brazil. Misumi woke up early as usual that day, practiced archery, and everything was fine. But something strange happened when Misumi suddenly found himself in front of a master who appeared before him in a majestic halo of light. The master told him that he would be transported to a new world called Isekai. Misumi was amazed, and the master was even more amazed, thinking that Misumi already knew about it. We later learn that this master is Tsukayomi, the ruler of the night world. Tsukayomi tells Misumi that he has come to Japan specifically to give him immense power to help him fit into his new world. Misumi was amazed by all this, especially when he remembered that Tsukayomi was one of the most powerful masters. Tsukayomi granted the power to Misumi, who was transported to the new world as soon as it happened. But once he moved to Isekai, he found himself unwelcome there by the mistress, who mocked him and told him to stay away from the inhabitants of her world. Tsukayomi was forced to reappear and sacrifice a large portion of his spiritual energy and give it to Misumi so that he could become superhuman and qualify for life in his new world. Tsukayomi disappeared and Misumi began his journey, but he soon grew tired, especially after going 3 days without food or drink. Boredom began to creep in as well, as he didn't see any living creatures and could only hear footsteps and the sound of the wind. On the evening of his third day, he heard a girl's cry for help, so he quickly approached the source of the sound to get a closer look. And there he saw what surprised him, where he saw a huge ferocious dog with 2 heads. And the strange thing is that the dog was talking and asked Misumi in a frightening voice for his name. Misumi replied with his new name in Isekai, Makoto. Soon the dog began to attack Misumi and a fierce battle ensued, but Misumi was able to use his super strength and kill the dog. But what made him most surprised was that when he approached the girl, it was not a girl, but a pig dressed in human clothes and talking like a human. The pig thanked him for his bravery, and when Misumi asked her who she was, she told him that her name was Emma and that she used to be human, but she had to change into this form in order to offer herself as a sacrifice because her village was no longer producing crops and had suffered a drought in recent years. Misumi then asked her where the nearest village was, and she told him that it was far away and he would have to continue on. Although Misumi was very tired, he had to keep going no matter what, and so he did, resenting the master who had given him such a bad reception in Isekai and sent him to the farthest reaches of the land. Finally, after an arduous journey with Emma, Misumi reached a village where he found food and sat down to eat greedily. Misumi noticed that Emma was able to pull dishes onto the table by airplane and asked her how she did it. Emma told him that it was because of the magic spells that everyone in their village had mastered. Misumi asked her to teach him, and Emma started to do so, and we noticed that Misumi's level was way behind hers. Misumi thanked her for the hospitality and went to bed thinking about everything that had happened. In the morning, Emma found out that Misumi had left and was very sad. She found a letter from him in which he wrote that he had taken the paper with the spells and would learn everything. He promised to return as soon as he reached a high magical level in order to help them regain the ability to farm. Misumi began to use the spells to defeat the Shin Dragon, which Misumi learned from Emma was responsible for the fog and drought that destroyed agriculture. But one day he misused one of the spells, summoning the Shin Dragon. Misumi tried to use the super strength that Tsukayomi had given him, but the dragon was much stronger, and Misumi decided to surround himself with an aura of power that would protect him from the dragon's attacks. But soon after the dragon realized that Misumi came from the human world, he suggested that they work together, especially after the dragon was able to access Misumi's memory and see what was in it. Shin Dragon and Misumi eventually came to an agreement in which the dragon would help Misumi, much to Misumi's delight. We saw Shin Dragon giving Misumi a portion of his powers so that they could work together. After Misumi fulfills his agreement with the dragon, he gains extra strength and we see him at the Rembrandt Trading Company to make a deal with the manager. We notice that Misumi now wears a mask and communicates only by writing so as not to reveal his true personality, as he is still a young boy. Patrick Rembrandt, the company's representative, was a bit surprised that Misumi could only speak by writing, but he got over it. Patrick then began to ask how Misumi was doing, and when he arrived, he replied that he had arrived yesterday. We learned that Rembrandt is a company for adventurers, but they also do some business. The company representative was surprised that Misumi, even though he wanted to join the group, had a clean record of adventuring, which would make it difficult for him to join. The company representative apologized and told him that there was no way he could accept an adventurer with no past adventures into his professional team. But Misumi surprised Patrick with some of the rarest gemstones, which really surprised Patrick, especially since he was in desperate need of these stones to fight a rare and dangerous disease that his wife and daughters had contracted. So the conversation changed radically, and Patrick apologized to Misumi profusely. Misumi asked him about this rare disease, and Patrick replied that the disease was caused by a quack doctor who wanted to harm them, and although although the doctor was arrested, the investigators failed to learn any substantial information about the disease or its treatment. But after many tests, they realized the importance of sapphires in the treatment. After the conversation was over, Misumi asked Patrick how to join the Merchants Guild and told him that he wanted to start his own business. Patrick told him where the guild was located and that he had to pass an important test to be accepted into the guild. Misumi thanked him and left to go to the Merchants Guild, but there he was shocked to learn that there were 2 exams instead of 1, with one being written theory and the other practical. When Misumi asked about the nature of the 2 exams, the official replied that the theoretical exam contained several complex questions about trade and informed him that there were similar models of these questions in a book worth 2 gold coins. As for the practical exam, the purpose was to collect rare items that require a skilled adventurer because the guild holds the theory that a skilled merchant must be brave. Although the amount was too much for him, he decided to buy it, and after reading it, he decided to take the exam. The exam questions were indeed very difficult, but Misumi answered them all perfectly and in record time. Even the proctor was amazed that Misumi managed to get a perfect score, the first time a test taker had managed to get a perfect score in such a short time. The official then asked Misumi to randomly select a ball from a box on the table, which Misumi did. The official then told him that he had to fetch 4 items, the most dangerous of which was the Howling Fang, which would require great skill to fetch given the dangers that Misumi would face. However, Misumi managed to obtain all of these items in record time and presented them to the officials, who told him that his guild credentials were about to be issued. Misumi was overjoyed, especially since the rules would have required him to wait up to 6 months if he failed to pass either of the 2 tests. Shortly afterward, Misumi was issued a credential card that allowed him to roam anywhere in the guild. Misumi went to one of the guild's cafes, but he was surprised by the drinks they served there, and when he tasted them, he didn't like the taste, so he went out to find something he knew to eat. He then met his fellow guildmates and noticed that the atmosphere was tense. When he asked one of them why, she replied that the relationship between Tomo and Miyu was not going well. We noticed that the main reason for the disagreement was extreme jealousy, as each of them all wanted to catch Misumi's eye, but he didn't care about such things. When it was time for bed, Misumi went into his bedroom and was surprised to find Miyu and Tomo in the same room. The problem for him was that there were only 2 beds in the room, which meant he had to sleep next to one of them. Jealousy flared up again, and the conflict almost erupted again, but Misumi decided to sleep alone on the couch, leaving each of them with a bed. Things were quiet in the guild and Misumi was getting used to the atmosphere, but he didn't know what to expect. Patrick Rembrandt's enemies were keeping a close eye on Misumi, and were amazed at how quickly Misumi passed the guild's exams and began to formulate their plan to eliminate Patrick. We learn that the Shin Dragon, after completing her agreement with Misumi, is no longer in her dragon form, but has transformed into one of Misumi's colleagues within the guild. That's why we saw Misumi talking to her about the terms of the agreement and they discussed it together. Afterward, Shin decided to take Misumi on a tour to show him how she created the fog that caused drought and poor harvests in Emma's village. Misumi was amazed at the strange world, and even more so when he saw some of the fruits he was used to in his human world. Misumi was amazed at the enormity of the place, so he used one of his powers to measure the dimensions of the place and realized that the place stretched for vast distances. After some time, Misumi decided to return with the Shin Dragon to Emma's village. In the village, we saw Emma, who was very frightened when she saw Shin and kept asking Misumi why he was taking her to their village. But Misumi reassured her and told her that he had made an agreement with Shin that their differences would be resolved, and indeed, after a short time, all was well. The village chief was pleased with this reconciliation through Misumi, and so was Emma, who kept thanking Misumi for saving her and her village after this reconciliation with Shin. But what Misumi didn't know was that the contract he made with Shin required the people of Emma's village to relocate to another place under Shin's control. This worried Misumi, especially when Shin told him that the new place where the villagers would live was located in a desolate area high above the ground. But Shin reassured him and the villagers that there would be no more disagreements and that everything would be fine. Misumi was then surprised by a miniature version of Shin. He was horrified and kept asking Shin about the creature, at which point Shin laughed and told him that she could clone herself. Misumi asks her about the rest of her superpowers, but she tells him that she'll let him know in time. The residents of Emma village moved to the Orc Highlands, which became their new home, and all was well. On the Orc Highlands, Misumi noticed that his superpowers were increasing, which led him to realize that the main reason for this was that he was close to Shin's sphere of influence. He found himself able to control many things better and more accurately than before. His only weakness was when Shin was able to access his memory, and he had to agree to her every request. Misumi noticed that Shin was recording all the memories she had access to in his mind. He realized this when he saw many of his memories in front of him and asked her to never let his memories out in public again. Misumi decided to create a secluded area relatively far from where the people of Emma village lived, and there he was surprised by a tree that was very large, but he was able to cut it down with his magic sword. Although the sword was small, its power was enormous and it cut down the tree in record time. But Misumi realized that he had injured himself. Misumi tried to try the healing spells on himself, but all his attempts failed, so he began to try other spells. The sound of Shin's arrival interrupted his train of thought as she came carrying the body of a badly injured old man. Misumi marveled at the scene and asked Shin about it. Shin told him that a creature had attacked her territory. The creature's remnants, which consisted of sharp objects, showed the creature's ferocity. Shin told Misumi that his human blood could bring the alien to their location. Much to Shin's dismay, the alien soon appeared and began a vicious attack on Misumi and Shin. Misumi tried to be calm and began to use his magic spells, focusing on using the fire spell to maximize the amount of damage he could inflict on the creature. Shin was amazed at what was happening and kept encouraging Misumi to attack. But strangely enough, even though Misumi used his best spells, the creature was able to absorb the spell. What's more, it used the infected area to create antibodies to Misumi's spells. We can say that the power of this creature is its ability to withstand successive blows, to deal with them, and to use them to heal itself. The injured old man started talking and Shin asked him who he was and he told her that he was the leader of the dwarves. At the time, Misumi was trying to learn more about the attack techniques of the creature, which turned out to be a giant spider. However, the spider soon launched an even more powerful attack, and the spider managed to seriously injure Misumi, but Misumi was able to endure the pain. Misumi then decided to summon as much power as he could, shaped it into an ice spell, and fired it violently at the spider and got rid of it. However, due to the effort, Misumi lost consciousness as soon as the battle was over. After some time, the spider woke up and started talking to Shin, who told her that she is currently in her human form but was once a dragon. The spider was amazed and decided to make a pact with Misumi and Shin. After the deal was finalized, Misumi gained a new superpower and the spider turned into a beautiful girl. Misumi regained consciousness and was surprised to find the spider in her human form, offering him her services. After Misumi fulfills his agreement with the spider, he is amazed at the many transformations taking place in Isekai. First, he gained the Shin dragon, and now he's gained a very powerful and beautiful spider, so he was eager to see what's next. Then we saw this old dwarf, whose name we learned was Perrin, talking to Misumi and thanking him for stopping the spider and winning her over to his side, especially since Misumi was able to save the dwarf's entire village. The old man then asked Misumi to allow him and his people to move to the same village as Misumi. When Misumi hesitated to answer him, Shin spoke to the old dwarf and told him that they agreed on condition that the dwarfs pay all the taxes and share the life of the land with them. The old man told them that he agreed and asked them to return for 2 days to his village to convince the people and then take them to live with Misumi and his companions. Misumi noticed that the Shin dragon and the spider were starting to get jealous of each other. He also noticed that each of them was wooing him with their actions and trying to look better than their counterparts. But the jealousy came to a head when Shin dragon asked Misumi to give her a new name. Misumi started thinking and came up with the name Tomo and gave it to Shin, who was overjoyed. The spider became jealous and also asked Misumi to give her a name, so Misumi kept thinking until he named her Miyu, and she was very happy. The old dwarf managed to convince the people of his village and brought them all to talk to Misumi. Then we saw Tomo and Miyu introduce Misumi to the people of the dwarf village and tell everyone that Misumi is the master of this village and give him the title of Little Master. The village elder named Eldo, who was very old, came forward and was surprised when he realized that Misumi, despite his young age, was the leader of the village, but he treated him with respect. Misumi was very surprised to see many different kinds of monsters that he didn't know before. When he asked them about their types, each leader of a particular class introduced his class to Misumi, and they all told him that they were at his disposal, and that they would partner with him in defending the village against any enemy. After Misumi finished his conversation with the new citizens, he left the place to think about everything that had happened, but he was surprised by a group of humans with darts and arrows. He found that they were ready to fight, and indeed, as soon as they spotted Misumi nearby, they started shooting arrows at him. Misumi narrowly escaped, but he was very unhappy, so he asked the dwarves why the humans were chasing him. It told him that the humans had heard him speak in eloquent language, which meant to them that Misumi was a demon and a great danger to them. Misumi knew the only solution was to learn the vernacular, and at first he thought it would be easy. But when he dug deeper, he found that learning slang was much more difficult than learning classical language. But he was determined to learn it because it was necessary so that he could live peacefully in his new world. After the first week, Misumi didn't feel any better. He found it very difficult, but he continued to try. However, it wasn't until after the first month that we can say that there was any noticeable improvement. Misumi was finally able to speak for a few minutes, using the vernacular correctly, which made him very happy. Satisfied with his vernacular, Misumi decided to visit the human village so that he could go to the Zetsuya Adventurers Guild. Misumi, Miyu, and Tomo set out for the village, and after arriving at the village gates, they all managed to get through by speaking slang to the guards. After a successful attempt, Misumi was assured that he was good enough to deal with everyone. Misumi was impersonating the son of a wealthy merchant, but he, Tomo, and Miyu wanted to join the Adventurers Guild, so they had to pass the exams. At first, the guild official gave gave them some easy tests, but she was surprised when they passed them with ease, and even more surprised when she found that their level was almost higher than the Adventurers Guild's best students. The Adventurers Guild official then learned that Misumi also possessed a license from the Merchants Guild, which qualified him for a rapid rise in level. After this happened, we found the old adventurers of the guild furious with these guests who had suddenly come to them and managed to occupy the top ranks of the guild. The three of them were issued admission cards, and Misumi found out the salary he would receive, and although the salary was satisfactory, Misumi was angry at the high cost of lodging, food, and drink within the guild. Misumi, Tomo, and Miyu went to their room and thought things were going well, but they were unaware of the danger they were in. Misumi felt a voice following him, and when he stopped walking, it was a young girl. Miyu intervened firmly, yelling at the girl and asking her what she wanted, but the girl became frightened and ran to Misumi, crying. Misumi calmed the girl down and told Miyu to leave the girl alone, and they had no choice but to take the girl back to the house where they were staying. Although it seemed normal, we noticed that someone was listening to the whole situation, as if it was an act of commission and not an accident, as Misumi thought. Misumi, Miyu, and the little girl went back to the house, where the girl began to tell her story. The girl, named Rinon, said she and her sister used to live in a house they rented, but after a while, they were kicked out. The problem is that Rinon can't find her sister, who disappeared about a month ago. While Rinon was telling her story, Misumi heard a noise outside. When he came out of the house, he found Tomo engaged with some people who were tracking Rinon, and Misumi noticed that Tomo easily dispatched them. Misumi has been pondering the mystery of the girl who can't find her sister for a long time, racking his brain for possibilities. Rinon gave Misumi a picture that almost matched her sister's appearance. Misumi thanked her and promised to do his best to solve the mystery. He then told her the location of the room she would be sleeping in, causing Tomo and Miyu to be very jealous, as usual. Misumi felt that he was beginning to be attracted to Tomo and Miyu, but he tried not to think about it. Instead, he wanted to strive for advancement in the Adventurers Guild while trying to solve the mystery of Rinon and help her find her sister. The next day, we saw Misumi traveling through the village with Rinon by his side, and they talked about Rinon's past, who told Misumi that she used to belong to a family of powerful adventurers. But she and her sister had fallen so low that they couldn't make ends meet, and before her sister's disappearance, their financial situation was very difficult. At that time, Miyu and Tomo were alone in the house, but they were surprised by the arrival of someone they didn't recognize from afar. However, when the person approached, Tomo and Miyu were surprised to find that it was Mills, who was the guild's most powerful adventurer of all time, so they were very surprised to find him in front of them. Misumi's conversation with Rinon led him to the place where she had recently been working, and he offered to take her there to talk to the people in charge to see if they could help her find her sister. Misumi and Rinon arrived at the place and cast an invisibility spell on himself, and after Rinon went inside, Misumi was nowhere to be seen. The person in charge started talking to Rinon and asked her who she was living with. Rinon told him about Misumi and his friends. This person told her to steal all the gold coins belonging to Misumi and her friends. When Rinon was surprised, the man told her that this was necessary in order to pay off her sister's debts and eventually find her. Miyu and Tomo learn that although Mel's is the strongest adventurer in the village, he is the leader of the evil business in the village, and it is when Mel's offers to help him capture Misumi that they are most surprised. Miyu and Tomo were surprised and asked him why, at which point he told them that Misumi was one of the most dangerous monsters in their village. Miyu and Tomo naturally reject the offer and start attacking Mel's and his assistants. But Mel's magical power was so great that he was able to create a magical barrier in front of him, preventing Mio and Tomo's blows from reaching him. Meanwhile, Rinon was very confused. She didn't want to steal Misumi because he was the one who helped her in her crisis. However, she was torn about what to do because robbing Misumi was the only way she could find her sister. At this point, Misumi appeared to reassure Rinon that he was able to read her thoughts and reassured her that they would find her sister without having to steal anyone, and Rinon was very happy about that. We returned to Tomo and Miyu and saw them start a fierce battle against Mel's and his associates. Mel's was extremely careless in the battle because he was overconfident in his magical power and the strength of his men. However, Tomo and Miyu teach him and his men a harsh lesson in a short time, much to the surprise of Mel's, who didn't think they were that strong. Even though they had won the battle, they were still jealous of each other, so they began to tell each other that they were the main reason for the victory. Then they began to show off their strength and tell each other that they had eliminated more men, which made the village loud and angry at their super strength. After the battle was over, Rinon was able to find her sister, and they were overjoyed. Her sister kept apologizing to her for getting her into so much trouble, and then Misumi picked them up and took them back home. Misumi then began to chastise Tomo and Miyu for overusing their superpowers. He takes some of Miyu's cobwebs, ties them up, and releases them outside. After the many battles that took place in the village, much of the village was destroyed, and Tomo began to seriously consider leaving the village, which was good news for Miyu, of course, who wanted this to happen because if Tomo left, she would be living alone with Misumi. Afterward, Rinon and Miyu had a conversation and Rinon asked her if she was Misumi's girlfriend or not. Miyu felt very ashamed and told her that she was just a follower and not his girlfriend. Misumi then decided to move out of the village and took Rinon Renan, her sister, and Miyu with him. On the way, a group of rare monsters in the form of red-colored birds appeared. As soon as Renan saw them, she informed Misumi that they were a rare and dangerous species. Misumi asked Miyu to engage these monsters. Renan warned her not to aim her blows at the eyes or wings, and Renan's sister informed her that the main weakness of these monsters is their abdomen. But Misumi changed his mind at the last minute and decided to do the job, so he pulled out his bow and arrows and started aiming arrows at the monsters. We saw that they were so accurate that all the arrows hit and killed the monsters, and Misumi didn't miss a single arrow. Miyu, Renan, and her sister were amazed at the accuracy of Misumi's aim and began to feed on parts of the killed insects, which was suitable food for them as they used to do before they transformed into their human form. They also paid attention to the sapphire eyes that the insects had, because those eyes added a lot of power to them. Misumi then decided to continue on to the town of Tsegi, and after a long journey, they reached their destination. Misumi began to familiarize himself with the town and then headed to the Seiji Adventurers Guild. There, Misumi thought he would find that his Adventurers Guild ID card had been upgraded, but to his surprise, he was still at the same rank. But luck smiled on him when he learned that the biggest job in the guild at the time was from the Rembrandt Company, who wanted to obtain a large number of sapphire eyes, which he already had after his last battle against the bugs. Renan and her sister thanked Misumi profusely for what he had done for them and decided to separate from the group. But Misumi was determined to make the goodbye even better, so they all decided to go to a restaurant for a celebratory meal. In the evening, we saw them all enter a butcher shop. Misumi was soon attracted by the pleasant smell of the food and was overjoyed when he saw the meat, so he pounced on it and was very impressed by its wonderful taste. A number of members of different sects who lived in the same village joined Misumi, and everyone began to enjoy their meals and chat with each other. After a short time, one of the dwarves asked Misumi to challenge him to an arm wrestling match. Despite the strength of the dwarf's arms, Misumi managed to win without much effort. Misumi ordered more meat, the fun dinner party ended and everyone left. We saw Misumi talking to Miyu about everything that happened at the party, and then Misumi asked her to go home alone. When Miyu asked why, Misumi told her that he was going to go to his carriage to collect things before thieves attacked them like before. Miyu was very happy to finally be alone with Misumi without Tomo. Miyu returned home alone, and shortly after, Misumi returned as well. Miyu wanted to spend the night talking, but Misumi soon fell into a deep sleep, much to Miyu's annoyance. The next morning, Misumi accompanied Miyu to the dwarf village, and soon they met Emma, who was amazed at the formal way Misumi spoke. So she told him that he should speak as he pleased and in a manner befitting his high status in the village. Misumi told her that he would do so and that this formal way of speaking was due to his time out of the village, which was filled with many tasks and characters that he had to impersonate. Misumi then decided to make a large number of repairs in the village and actually made an agreement with all the sects there for construction and reconstruction. Misumi asks Miyu if she's had any recent contact with Tomo, but she tells him no. When Misumi asks Emma, she tells him she doesn't know anything about Tomo. While they were all talking, Eldo, the old dwarf who was the village elder, came running up to Misumi and told him it was good to see him, and then Eldo offered his services to help build and improve the village. Afterward, Eldo presented some robes that had a superhuman ability to block all blows, and although Misumi was not encouraged, after trying them on, he chose one of them. Misumi then went to Rembrandt's headquarters and delivered the package and told the company's director that his first mission was much more difficult than he thought. At the Rembrandt facility, Misumi was in the parking lot with another person to give the ruby insect eyes to the company officials. When it was Misumi's turn, the person who was with Misumi stepped forward to perform the ritual, but Misumi was amazed that the person was shivering like a wet kitten. Misumi realized the importance of those ruby eyes to the company officials and learned that they highly value ruby eyes because they are able to extract a rare substance from them after complex chemical processing. Suddenly, Misumi's stupid roommate staggered across the room and dropped the ruby eyes, and Misumi took a huge leap and saved the day. Misumi's amazement at Rembrandt's interest in the liquid ended when he learned the truth. He learned that the owner's wife had recently contracted a rare disease that left her with a curse that made her lose her beauty, lose her hair, and become a ghost. Knowing this, Misumi decided to intervene himself and asked the manager to let him treat his wife. Although the official was uncomfortable because his wife's situation was so difficult, he eventually gave in to Misumi's insistence. Misumi went to the place where the company owner's wife was, and strangely enough, as soon as she saw him, she attacked him with all the ferocity of a predator. But Misumi didn't pay attention to that and quickly asked for medicine from the official who was with him. Strangely enough, as soon as the company owner's wife took a dose of the liquid extracted from the ruby eyes, she recovered most of her health, and most of her symptoms disappeared. After Rembrandt's owner was satisfied that Misumi had the ability to heal, he told him that his daughter was also suffering from the same disease. Misumi took another dose of the remedy and went straight to his daughter's room and found her suffering from the same symptoms, albeit not as advanced as her mother's. Misumi knew this because the girl told him to go away, so Misumi concluded that she still had some human feelings. But he approached her and the monster inside her came out and attacked him, but he was able to give her the potion and most of her symptoms disappeared and her appearance normalized. surprised. Rembrandt's relatives were amazed at the rare courage Misumi had shown in his treatment. The owner of the company asked him who he was, but Misumi told him that he was an ordinary person and that there was nothing to praise, he had only done his duty. After Misumi finished his task, he walked out of the company's headquarters and was surprised to find Tomo and Miyu waiting for him and began to ask him about everything he had done since the last time they met. Misumi started to speak, but soon heard a loud noise that he thought was coming from the footsteps. But it was loud enough to suggest that a herd of raging bulls was on its way. A few moments later, a large number of fighters arrived on the scene and immediately began to engage Misumi. Tomo made a typical attempt to win Misumi's favor, so she used the power of the dragon within her and bravely defended him. Of course, Miyu didn't like this and decided to sit back and watch, but it didn't take long for Misumi and Tomo to defeat these fighters with ease. Misumi then realized that the young man who was with him inside Rembrandt was behind all of this, and that it was all a plan by the company's haters to eliminate its powerful influence in the market. He told Misumi, Miyu, and Tomo that there was an agreement between him and a villain to synthesize a substance with a powerful curse and then release it on people, especially those close to Rembrandt's family, so they chose the owner's wife and daughter first. Misumi asks Tomo to read the memories of this young man, whose name we learn is Lime, and Tomo does so and confirms to Misumi that he is indeed telling the truth. Lime thought that Misumi was going to inflict the cruelest torture on him, but Misumi told him that he would leave him alone to get his life back on track as long as he didn't return to such evil deeds again. Lime was overjoyed because this was contrary to his desperate expectations. Before Lime left, Misumi asked him to go and apologize to the Rembrandt family for the trouble he had caused them. But when he went to apologize, the company owner's brother wanted to put him to death for what he had done. But the company owner told his brother that his wife and daughter had recovered and there was no need to punish Lime out of respect for Misumi, who promised to release him. Tomo had broken Lime's sword in the battle, so after things calmed down and they were on good terms, Tomo gave him a new sword as a gift. Lime was fascinated by the sword because it looked like a masterpiece, but Tomo told him that nothing in life is free, and that it was in exchange for Lime becoming her spy. Lime looked at her like an idiot and asked her not to embellish. She was asking him to be her lapdog, and Tomo told him that she really wanted that. After Misumi completed his mission at Rembrandt, he went back to live in the dwarf village and everything was fine. But one day while eating lunch with Tomo and Miyu, Emma tells them that she has something important to tell them. Misumi asks Emma to tell him what she wants, and Emma starts talking to him. She tells him that she wants Misumi, along with Miyu and Tomo, to oversee the training of the dwarf village fighters so that they can stand up to any enemy in case of danger. Misumi agreed to her request and assigned Tomo and Miyu to gather the necessary information to familiarize themselves with the various abilities of the fighters within the village. Misumi then went on a tour of the village, during which he overheard some of the fighters talking. One of them was saying to the other, "Is it necessary to train under this idiot? I'd rather die." Misumi understood that they were objecting to training under him and knew that he was in for a dark and barren day. As for Tomo and Miyu, as usual, they both tried to compete for Misumi's favor, while Tomo was gathering information for the fighters. Miyu had more important things to do and was busy wooing Misumi by bringing him fresh fruit. Tomo came back and saw the scene, which upset her, and then told Misumi that the fighters' fighting ability was lower than she had expected and that it would be difficult to train them. Emma was in the same place as the conversation between Tomo and Misumi, so she told Misumi that the fighters may not be willing to show all their skills so as not to start training. Also, each class doesn't want to show their tactics and secrets in front of other classes. Tomo came up with an idea at that time and showed it to Misumi, who ordered all the fighters to gather for a talk. The fighters gathered, but in fact, Misumi didn't speak to them, Tomo did. We could see from her words that she was deliberately stirring up each faction against the others, until it came to a head and the clashes between the factions began. Tomo then told them that each of the sects should nominate a fighter to fight against the other sect's fighter. Two cults nominated a fighter and a fierce battle between the fighters began. At this moment, Misumi was worried about what was happening. He had a feeling that these fighters were going to raze the village to the ground. The battle ended with one of the fighters winning, but Tomo still took her anger out on everyone and told them that this battle only showed a low level of strength. She told all the fighters that if they continue at this level, they will be defeated by any enemy. Tomo spoke to the fighters in a harsh manner, much to the surprise of Misumi, who felt that he was useless and that Tomo had become the leader in his place or had forgotten that he even existed. Tomo then told everyone that she had created an intensive training schedule in which the fighters would undergo rigorous training on a daily basis. There would be individual battles at the end of each training session to see how the fighters were progressing. She also kept motivating them, telling them that she herself would evaluate each fighter, and the one who rose to the top would join the army of strong fighters who would defend the village from the dangers. Misumi was thinking to himself, when is this idiot going to finish talking so I can go home and eat without being bothered by her? Tomo soon finished talking and the fighters were encouraged to stick to her plan. Misumi went with Tomo to the Adventurers Guild to check his current level with his card. There he learned that his level had increased, but not as much as he thought, and that the oldest adventurer had retired. Tomo then began to train the fighters in hardcore types of training in order to raise their level quickly. Most of the fighters improved significantly, except for a handful of idiots idiots that Tomo berated and reprimanded every day. After the fighters finished their field training, Tomo took them to the most difficult stage, which was the simulation of real battles. She designed a full battlefield as if they were in an actual war and assigned each fighter a specific task. Despite the different categories of fighters, the training made them merge into a single army. One day, Tomo asked them to fight a battle against an army of monkeys. The attack was successful and every fighter did his part except for the dwarf, who made a huge mistake in estimating the amount of poison he was supposed to throw in the way of the monkeys. Tomo told him, "If you make that mistake again, you idiot, you'll never be on the team again." The fighters then reached the final level and were tasked with going out of Segi village for a mission in the forests of Tenarak. After a short time, they returned to the village and told Tomo that they had accomplished everything they had set out to do. Tomo rejoiced and told them that they had become the powerful army responsible for protecting the village. Misumi learned from the fighters that the forests of Tenarak are full of ruby eyes, so he decided to move there. At the same time, he wanted to open a store where he could sell items extracted from the sapphire eyes. So he had to go to the owner of Rembrandt to ask for a store. Although it's against the rules, the owner considers what Misumi did for him in the past when he saved his wife and daughter, so he decides to give him the store. Misumi, along with Miyu and Tomo, arrive in the Tenarak forest and begin to explore the place, but they don't realize that someone is spying on them. At the time, the adventurers were eavesdropping on Misumi, Miyu, Tomo, and Emma to find out what they were up to in their forest. In fact, Misumi was there to search for a rare type of flower that would help him produce various products that he would like to sell exclusively in his store. The jealousy between Tomo and Miyu continued as they each tried to get Misumi's attention. We saw Tomo after she had prepared delicious food for Misumi, and then Miyu decided not to miss the opportunity and went to feed Misumi herself, which naturally angered Tomo. Misumi wasn't as concerned about all this as he was about finding the flower he wanted, and we saw him asking the helpers if they had found the flower. One of the assistants reassured him that they had found the flower and told him the coordinates that would help them find it. Misumi then began celebrating his new store, and all the groups were happy and gathered to listen to Misumi's speech. But Misumi didn't think he was a good speaker and couldn't say much in front of them. At night, Misumi decided to hold a meeting of the different classes to tell each class their new role. We see a representative of the lizard class named Lady telling Misumi that his class is very strong and has a great ability to fight. As for the dwarf class, Misumi told him that his class would be in charge of manufacturing weapons because dwarves are very skilled in blacksmithing. The bear class representative, who was larger than Misumi's sorrows after moving to the new world, appeared next. Misumi asked him what his class was going to do, and the representative told him that they were going to introduce all the classes to the fictional city. It was funny to Misumi because the bear's voice was soft and disproportionate to its size. We saw Tomo talking to Miyu, who was worried that she hadn't told Misumi something very important about beings called ambrosia, creatures that take care of the flower that Misumi is looking for. But Tomo kept reassuring her that it was no big deal. Meanwhile, Miyu couldn't tell if Tomo was really advising her or trying to set her up to get closer to Misumi. Suddenly, a stray arrow flew into the place where they were sitting, startling them both. But Miyu was even more frightened. She ran over to where Misumi was and hugged him. Miyu was furious and said to herself, "That sly girl never misses an opportunity to get close to Misumi." They then asked Misumi what happened and Misumi told them that he was just practicing archery. But to their surprise, the stray arrow went out of all the orbits that Misumi had been shooting arrows through. From their point of view, there was only one explanation, and that was that Misumi's mana had risen. In other words, he was merging with all the entities around him, which was a dangerous sign, and Miyu was crying her eyes out. But Misumi kept reassuring her as she held him, and Tomo, of course, almost exploded with rage. Miyu decided to take care of Misumi that night and hoped to have a long talk with him. But as soon as he came home and Miyu started talking, Misumi told her that he was going to bed and had no time to waste, so Miyu left in shame. The next morning, Misumi was walking down the street to do some shopping for his store, but he runs into a very pretty girl who starts flirting with him. Miyu and Tomo appear out of nowhere and decide to punish Misumi. They took him back home and kept talking to him, asking him what they had done wrong to make him care about this strange girl. But Misumi told them, "Get off me, you two idiots, I don't have time for you." Misumi then went to the store to buy things to help him start his new store. After Misumi finished buying what he wanted, Miyu appeared and kept apologizing to Misumi for last night and what happened, but Misumi told her that there was no need to apologize and that everything was fine. The forest warriors were worried that Misumi would reach the place filled with the rare red lotus flower, so the forest warriors were watching Misumi and his companions' movements all the time. After some walking through the forest, Misumi and Miyu arrived at a place where there were a lot of lotus flowers. Misumi decided to stay because the ambrosia creatures always appear next to the lotus flowers to protect them. But then the lotus guards showed up and accused Misumi and Miyu of love being thieves. Misumi approached Miyu to protect her and held her hand. At that moment, Miyu forgot all about their situation and wished that time would stop at that moment so that Misumi could still hold her hand. But the flower guards didn't give them a chance and immediately began attacking them with deadly fire arrows. If it weren't for Misumi's powerful cloaking spell, he and his companions would have disappeared. The chase was fierce between the lotus flower guards and Misumi and Miyu. When Misumi sensed that danger was imminent, he tried to psychically communicate with Tomo, who was aware of what was happening, but her jealousy prevented her from intervening. She kept saying to herself, "Let's let that idiot do her thing." She meant Miyu, of course, as she was very angry with her after seeing Misumi holding her hand. When Misumi asked her for help, she refused and told him that Miyu would help him in her own way. When she's scared, she eats her favorite food. Misumi remembered that Miyu's favorite food is humans and knew that Tomo would rather die than see him with Miyu. Misumi wasn't interested in all this nonsense. He was in grave danger when the flower guards surrounded him and started attacking him and Miyu. Misumi tells Miyu to start summoning her superpowers and he does the same to engage the guards. But before the battle begins, Misumi decides to make one last attempt with the guards and tells them that he only came to talk to them, not to steal their flowers. He's not a thief, but a merchant looking for rare goods to sell in his own shop. The guards took him at his word and exchanged introductions, and Misumi recognized the guard as Aqua and his colleague as Iris. After their conversation was over, Aqua and Iris asked Misumi and Miyu to follow them to the Council of Elders, which is responsible for dealing with all visitors to the village. On the way, Misumi learns that this village is called Ogre Forest Village and that it is protected by a very powerful system of magical spells. Soon they arrived at the Council of Elders, who began to question them about why they had come to the village. Misumi told them that he was a merchant who had come to look for some rare medicinal materials to sell in his shop. However, some of the people sitting in the council did not believe this, especially because they felt that the aura emanating from Misumi and Miyu was too strong to be consistent with the aura emanating from human beings. Adono, who was a wild and talkative young man, then entered the conversation like a wild donkey and kept asking about the identity of Misumi and Miyu. Misumi knew that Adono was responsible for training Aqua and Iris, so he kept berating them for being defeated by Misumi and Miyu. But Misumi wasn't comfortable with the idea that Adono was just a coach, and was sure that he had something to do with demons and a dark secret behind him. So Misumi asked Miyu to spy on Adono. Although Miyu was happy that Misumi had given her a task, deep down she was annoyed because she felt that Misumi was only asking her to take advantage of her. Nevertheless, she began to follow Adono and soon realized that Misumi was right. She saw Adono in a psychic session, communicating with demons. One day during one of the sessions, Adono merged with the demon he was communicating with and began to take over the whole village. But Misumi decides to stand up to him, and the demon thinks Misumi's power is insignificant. But Misumi summoned all his spiritual energy and used his most powerful spells to destroy the demon's dark energy, and he managed to defeat it to the amazement of all the villagers. But the villagers were furious with Misumi for daring to use his spells against a member of the village. Tomo appeared at this time and told them that she was the great Shin Dragon. She told them that she was just a follower of Misumi, which made the villagers change their treatment of him for the better. Misumi took Adono in his demonic form and began interrogating him, asking him why he was using these spells. Adono told him that he was doing it to keep his strength up so no one could hurt him. That's when Misumi offered him a deal. Adono would show him the book of demonic spells in exchange for Misumi not killing him. Miyu and Tomo are surprised by Misumi's request and step forward to kill Adono before he gives Misumi the spells. Misumi told them to back off and told them that he would learn these spells as a matter of knowledge so that no one would be able to harm them in the future. But Tomo told Misumi that it's not that easy. There's something called the gift that will prevent him from knowing the spells. When Misumi asked her what the gift was, she told him that it was a human being who tried to travel between different worlds but got lost in the process. As Misumi continued his conversation with Adono, he realized that he was one of the gifts that got lost, and Adono was despondent that he would never be able to return to his world again. But Misumi asked him to show him his strength and told him that he would do his best, along with Miyu and Tomo, to bring him back to his home world. However, when Misumi began his attempt to return Adono to his original world, Adono transformed into his human form. He told Misumi that he would be happy to join him, and Misumi had a trio of Miyu, Tomo, and Adono. Suddenly, the unexpected happens as Tomo starts bleeding and loses consciousness while Adono and Miyu are distraught. Misumi was very confused about what happened to Tomo, but Adono told everyone to move quickly because he heard an explosion before Tomo fell and started bleeding. As soon as Misumi and Adono got out of their place, they were surprised to find most of the villagers injured and in a serious condition between life and death. This frightened Misumi, especially since he won't be able to use healing magic because his Adventurer's Guild score doesn't allow him to do so at the moment, and he needs to level up in his ID to be able to do so. Adono Adono offered to heal the injured, and Misumi agreed. Misumi then had the brilliant idea of combining his magic power with his mana to at least revive the injured. Adono asked him to save his mana and told him that he would deal with the rest of the infected. After a search, Misumi found the person who caused the explosion and confronted her with everything that had happened, at which point she tried to attack Misumi to kill him. But Misumi with his magical power was able to defeat her with his small dagger and killed her even though she had a large sword. The next day, Misumi saw that Tama was doing well and realized that others had lost their lives in the explosion, so he held a funeral for them, attended by all the people living in the village. Tomo and Miyu are back to harassing each other, with Tomo deliberately emphasizing Misumi's concern for her after what happened, much to Miyu's annoyance. Therefore, Miyu kept repeating that all this attention was unintentional, and that Misumi's defense of Tomo was an accident, and was just an emotional and impulsive decision. They kept arguing with each other non-stop, which drove Misumi out of his mind, and he kept telling them that you won't change no matter what. Misumi then began to plan how to protect the village from future attacks, assigning each class a specific task so that no one could harm the villagers again, because lizards are characterized by agility and constant vigilance. Misumi instructed their leader to divide his class into patrols that would continue throughout the day to check the areas around the village in order to identify all those entering or leaving the village. Misumi then assigned other tasks to the other classes, such as treating the injured, gathering information, and so on. Misumi also decided to build an invisible wall around the village as a clever defense strategy so that those who come will think they are in the fictitious city. The guards would be able to inform Misumi of the number of arrivals, and he could defend the village if he knew they were enemies. The leader of the dwarf tribe then came to talk to Misumi and told him that he would take care of the warehouse where all the detritus would be collected. Misumi asked him to dispose of all the detritus as soon as possible so that it would not be used in demonic magic spells again. The dwarf chieftain promised that he would take care of his work and be careful. All the people of Segi felt that they owed a debt of gratitude to Misumi, who had saved their village from ruin after his many efforts against all the evil plans that were about to be carried out in their village. But Misumi told them that he had only done his duty, and if it weren't for their efforts, the entire village would have been lost. We then moved on to the town of Rudesgard Academy, where Misumi was meeting with the owners of Rembrandt, who asked him for all the details to start financing his new store. Misumi asked them for a map in order to locate his store in the village of Segi on the map. When they brought the map, Misumi was certain that he had protected the village sufficiently to not expose it to dangerous attacks in the future. Misumi then began talking to the owners of the company about the details of the business, and the owner told him that he would write a letter of recommendation to encourage other stores in neighboring villages to do business with Misumi's store. Misumi was very grateful and thanked the owner, but the owner told him that this was nothing compared to Misumi's efforts in the past to cure his daughter and wife. Misumi then decided to stop lying to the owners of Rembrandt, so he took off the mask and expected them to fire him on the spot. The owner of the company handled the situation wisely and told him that he was not bothered by how his wife and daughter looked when they got sick, and he certainly wouldn't be bothered now that he knew the truth about Misumi's humanity. Misumi then returned to the village of Segi and began talking to Miyu, Tomo, and Adono, telling them that he would have to leave the village for a while. This was so that he could learn more about magic spells and also learn the science that would make his shop the best shop in all the villages. Misumi's friends were saddened by the news, but Misumi told them that he had prepared a gift for them that they would love. The gift consisted of several books with all his memories and knowledge that he had acquired up to that time, and they would have to work hard to study them until he came back to them again. Misumi then said goodbye to everyone, packed his bags and prepared to leave, but as soon as he left, he was surprised by a fierce attack. The attack was by two beautiful girls, but Misumi wasn't too concerned about that at the time, as one of the idiotic fighters struck Misumi with a powerful blow that severed most of his fingers. Misumi wasn't aware of what was going on, but he noticed that the aura emanating from the two fighters was indicative of their great strength. Misumi was frozen in place for a few seconds as he watched his hand with the amputated fingers, and then asked the two idiots who had attacked him why they had attacked him. They told him something that shocked him when he realized that the war between humans and demons had already begun, and that to them, he's an enemy at this time and they should kill him. Misumi was fortunate to have the protection of the master who transferred him from his original world to this human world, so he attacked them, but their strength was much higher than his, so they were unaffected by the attack. Misumi was then forced to change his attack strategy, and instead of making lightning strikes, he opted for stealth. But the two girls began to set up a lot of traps to prevent Misumi from escaping. Instead of attacking, Misumi decided to get to know them. They told him their names were Lancer and Sophie. Misumi introduces himself as an ordinary merchant who wants to go to his shop to buy and sell, but they told him that they would do their duty and kill him on the spot. Misumi had no choice but to fight, so he summoned all his spiritual energy and used all the mana he had and was able to repel their attack. Lancer and Sophie were very surprised because the spell that they attacked with was lethal and should have killed Misumi instantly, but it didn't. Therefore, they both felt that Misumi was not an easy opponent and that it would be very difficult to face him. Sophia then approached to engage Misumi, who was very afraid of this confrontation, especially since Sophia's weapon was very powerful, so Misumi felt that he was in big trouble. But the little elf's weapon was stronger than her sword, and Misumi managed to break Sophia's sword with a single blow. Lancer then rushed like a wild cow to attack Misumi, but it was too late because the demon army quickly arrived at their place and started attacking everyone in the place. Misumi wanted to end the scene, so he gathered all the power from the rings he was wearing. His focus was on the water spell that would defeat the demon's fire spells, and Misumi was able to drown everyone in the place and leave quickly. The owners of Rembrandt's company learned what had happened and were amazed that someone had been able to stop the demon army. Misumi then returned to stay in the village with Miyu and Tomo and told them that they were his top lieutenants, which made them happy, but not without the usual jealousy. Despite the victory and the fact that Misumi had managed to fend off any danger to the village, Misumi then met with the leader of the dwarf sect and thanked him for his elaborate weapons, which played an important role in the victory over all enemies. Misumi also began producing his first medical products, which had the magical ability to heal even the most difficult wounds in a matter of seconds. The owners of Rembrandt's company were watching everything from afar and were impressed by Misumi's great ability. He was able to transform Segi from a poor and weak village to a powerful village with a distinguished army, and a full-fledged store that specializes in selling magical products that can only be found in their store. Misumi then decided to embark on a long-delayed journey to find his father and mother in different worlds. While he was thinking about this, Emma came and interrupted his thoughts, telling him that everyone was gathered for the banquet to celebrate the opening of the store and that they were all listening to Misumi's speech. Misumi went to the meeting place of the sects to give the speech, and as he walked, he remembered the whole journey from beginning to end, and he kept telling himself that life in this human world isn't so bad. But when he arrived at the meeting place, he saw the constant disagreement between Tomo and Miyu and thought to himself that life would have been better without those two idiots. Back at it again with Misumi now in season 2. Although Misumi's life in the different world was successful, most of the teachers in this world did not want him to stay. But Misumi continued within the Isekai, working as a merchant and making good money thanks to the rare medicinal formulas that were unique to his shop. At the same time, he remembered his parents, who had once lived in the Isekai world. As time went on, Misumi thought about expanding his reach and went to Rothsgard Academy to open a new store. A few days later, Misumi, accompanied by Adomo, arrived in Rothsgard and kept thinking about Tomo and Miyu, who were waiting for them. Misumi met Miyu and Tomo, whose jealousy battles resurfaced and each tried to prove to Misumi that she was the best. Miyu made delicious rice for Misumi, but Tomo deliberately didn't tell her that she got the ingredients wrong to implicate her and Misumi. Miyu's mistake was that she added a rare metal to the rice, which is completely contrary to Misumi's nature, whose constitution and world are not suited to ingesting metals. But the dwarf class was fine with minerals, so their leader ate the rice with gusto. Afterward, Misumi thought to himself, those two idiots are giving me trouble all the time, everywhere, and now it's come to the dinner table. So Misumi decided to remedy this foolishness by going to a restaurant to eat a delicious meal of his favorite slime. After Misumi finished his meal, he went and tipped the server a lot and then went to the Adventurers Guild, where he found one of the girls grieving over the violent attack on her village. Although Misumi wanted to help her, she didn't even acknowledge his presence and left the guild in anger. However, Misumi followed her and noticed that she had an injured werewolf with her. Misumi offered to help them, but the girl was surprised and kept apologizing to Misumi for not noticing his presence in the guild. Misumi then asked them to recount everything that happened to their village, and they told him that the village was constantly being attacked. Misumi calmed them down and told them that everything would be fine. The girl and the injured werewolf were amazed, but Misumi didn't give them time to be amazed and flew them all the way to the village. After Misumi arrived in this village called Hayama, the girl and the werewolf told him that the official language of the village was slang and that his language would not fit in with the villagers. She also told him that she would tell the villagers that he was coming, but to the surprise of the girl and the werewolf, Misumi told them that he was just a simple merchant and adventurer. Of course, this didn't make sense to the villagers, who had noticed Misumi's superhuman abilities and felt that they were not suitable for an amateur. What was even more amazing to the villagers was that Misumi was doing all this for them and trying to defend them from the dangers that threatened them. But Misumi told them that he wanted to secure the village against any enemy, because if evil spreads to neighboring villages, everyone will be devastated. Miyu and Tomo were still searching for the most delicious recipes they could offer Misumi and kept competing with each other, telling each other that their food would be the best. So they created a judging panel divided into a representative from each category, who sat in their seats waiting for the delicious food. But Tomo and Miyu were ignorant of poisonous and harmful herbs, since one was a dragon and the other was a spider. So they made a lot of recipes that tasted far worse than the attack on the village. As usual, each of them was trying hard to prove to everyone that they were better than the other, but the crowd crowd was too busy eating to care. In the meantime, Misumi was busy looking for the attackers, and he found one of them and told them that the end of evil would be at his hands. Misumi and Adomo set out to look for clues to solve the mystery of the attack on the village. Although everything was quiet, Misumi didn't know what to expect. We traveled back in time before Misumi traveled to the Isekai and saw him meet Otanashi, who we could tell from her gaze that she had a crush on him. But Misumi got very nervous as soon as he saw her, so they chatted for a little while and then Misumi left, and Otanashi kept telling herself that she loved Misumi very much. Otanashi then went to meet the teacher, who told Otanashi that her world was being attacked by an evil demon army, so she decided to send 2 heroes to that world to fight the demon army. But Otanashi told her that she didn't want to take part in such a battle, and the teacher told her that this challenge in the new world would allow her to get closer to a friend she loves but can't talk to. Otanashi looked slyly at the teacher and naturally concluded that the teacher was talking about Misumi, so Otanashi accepted the teacher's offer. We then moved on to the kingdom of Lemia, which we learned was Otanashi's home kingdom, and she kept telling the people of the kingdom that she would protect them from the evil demon army that surrounded them. But in reality, Otanashi didn't know anything about fighting and didn't know how to use a sword at all, so she went to the kingdom's adventurers guild and asked a female fighter named Hiki to teach her how to use a sword, and although Hiki was reluctant, she eventually agreed. Otanashi began practicing under Hiki's tutelage on the borders of Lemia. One day, a pack of fierce wolves attacked them, and Hiki began to fight them bravely, but the wolves were too fierce. Suddenly, a brave girl appears out of nowhere and manages to outwit Hiki and Otanashi, who thank her and begin to recognize her. The girl told them that her name was Chia and that she was a priestess of Laurel, and asked Hiki to join her party. Despite Chia's bravery, Hiki was reluctant to accept her. After that, the battles against the demon army continued, and the fighters of the kingdom of Lemia were able to win all of them. But one day, they were surprised by a huge monster they had never seen before and recognized it as the Black Catastrophe Spider. A fierce battle began between the spider and the kingdom's warriors, and the spider was able to deliver powerful blows to them one after another. For the first time, Chia found herself face to face with this huge monster, but she was not afraid of the situation and attacked. But the monster managed to defeat them in the end. Despite the difficulty of the battle and the fact that the monster had wounded most of the fighters, Chia remained determined to avenge the monster in the next battle. Meanwhile, Misumi was bored and had nothing to do in this world. One day he was asleep and saw in his dream a teacher from another world who talked to him a lot and told him that she had chosen him to go to her world. Misumi was amazed and asked her why. She told him that she was doing it so that he could protect her world from the demon army. Misumi is amazed at what he hears and tells himself it's just a dream, but the teacher went on to tell him that she was going to choose another hero to help each other defeat the demon army. The teacher kept telling Misumi the advantages she would give him if he accepted her offer. She told him that it would give him a lot of strength and the ability to quickly get rid of fatigue. Misumi accepted the offer and told her that he would do his best and wouldn't let her down. He was transported directly to her world, where he met a princess named Front, who introduced Misumi to his fellow knight, whose name, we learned, was Jinya. Then the palace's head of magic formulas Yukanatsu entered and Misumi met a dragon summoner named Mura. In the evening, Princess Front met with Misumi and told him that all 3 of them liked Misumi, which was a big deal. But Misumi was surprised by such a thing. Even though it was Front who told him, we realized that she likes Misumi more than anyone else. While Misumi was heading to Rothsgard Academy, the battle between Lemia's army and the demon army was about to begin in order to retake Stella's fortress. The battle had already begun, and we saw the optimism of Lemia's Hayama army and their certainty of victory over the demons. And so was their princess, who kept motivating the army, telling the soldiers that their forces were almost 5 times as strong as the demon army, and that they had to end the battle in their favor as soon as possible. The leaders of the Lemia army were surprised that the princess chose to fight at night, especially since night battles are more difficult, and their experience is not very good. In the end, they resolved to fight at any time and assured everyone that they would achieve a quick victory and retake the fortress as soon as possible. Lemia's army then began to prepare for the battle and went to the master to receive her blessing. On the other hand, the demon army was able to learn a lot of information about Lemia's army, so they communicated this information to their leadership so that they would be fully prepared to defeat Lemia's army. Indeed, as soon as the leader of the demon army realized that the Lemia army was heading towards them, she moved to signal the start of the battle. When the Lemia army saw that the demon army was advancing towards them, they launched a fierce attack on them. Lemia's soldiers were amazed to see that the demon army was so weak, especially since they had managed to kill a large number of them at the beginning of the battle. They were so surprised that they thought the demon army was trying to deceive them, so the leadership of the Lemia army warned all the soldiers that this was a trap. The leader of the demon army quickly intervened and said to the Lemia army, "Go to hell, you idiots. Did you think it would end there and that the victory victory over the demon army would be so easy. The leader of the demon army then cast an extremely powerful magic spell that created a deep hole in the ground that swallowed up most of the Lemia army fighters. However, the fighters refused to give up and kept trying to get out of the hole, and most of them succeeded. They didn't know what awaited them outside the pit, as those who managed to get out were surprised to find a giant ogre, whose name they recognized as Io. This ogre began to fight them with great strength, and despite the courage of the Lemia army, they were unable to defeat the ogre despite their large numbers, and this was due to his great strength and size. The biggest problem was that Io had the ability to take away all the magical powers of the Lemia warriors. But all this did not prevent the Lemia warriors from holding out against Io until the next morning, much to Io's surprise, for he had not expected this to happen and thought he would kill all the Lemia warriors in the same night. Feeling their spirits lifted by having withstood Io for so long, the Lemia fighters decided to make one last strong attack to defeat him. Using their respective magical abilities, they attacked Io one by one and managed to injure him. But it wasn't enough to bring him down, so one of the Lemia fighters, whose name we learn is Navar, decided to sacrifice herself and used her most powerful spells to attack Io while her teammates escaped. Navar was able to defeat Io to the sadness of her classmates, who did not want Navar to sacrifice herself and wished that they could have completed the battle together. Despite the strength of the demon army, Lemia's army was able to win, and they were also able to retake Stella's fortress. While this battle was going on between Lemia's army and the demon army, Misumi was sick and receiving treatment from Tomo and Miyu. We then saw Miyu walking with Tomo and talking about Misumi and how he has reached a great place in everyone's hearts. They also talked about the upcoming battles that Misumi will have to fight against the demon army in order to protect all the neighboring villages. At that time, Misumi was not so much concerned with battles as he was with trading and familiarizing himself with the shops in Rothsgard, so he and Adomo often wandered the streets of Rothsgard to familiarize themselves with the goods on display in the shops, and figure out how he would be able to compete with all the merchants there, especially since there were so many stores in Rothsgard, which meant that Misumi would have to offer a different product in order to make a profit. Suddenly, they were interrupted by a group of young men and women dressed in Rothsgard Academy uniforms. Interestingly, the conversation wasn't friendly as they began to harass Misumi. They also began to show off their various skills in using the magic spells they had learned at the academy. For the first time, Misumi found himself missing Miyu and Tomo because their presence meant that no one would be able to get in his way in the first place. Misumi tried to use his mind instead of his strength, but he was provoked by the Rothsgard Academy guys. So Misumi had to teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. Misumi used one of his most powerful spells, scaring the youths into retreat. But as usual, because Misumi's personality is irresistible, the girl who was with those guys took a liking to him. She told him that she was a waitress at a nearby restaurant and asked him to go there soon. After the girl left, Misumi and Adomo remembered that they hadn't cancelled the magic spell they used on the academy guys. That's why we were surprised to see them flying through the air, crying out for them to bring them back down to Earth. Although Adomo didn't want to do it, Misumi asked him to break the spell so that the youths could return to Earth again, and Adomo did as Misumi commanded. Misumi then spoke to Adomo and told him that he wanted to go to Rothsgard Academy. When Adomo asked him why, Misumi told him that he was doing it to take the entrance exam so that he could be enrolled in the academy and be able to officially license his shop and trade in the village. Adomo warned him about the difficulty of the academy's test and told him that the owners of Rembrandt's company had created the test and that only those with a very high level of ability could pass it. At the same time, Rembrandt's owners were watching Misumi and predicting that he wouldn't be able to pass the test. The day of the test came and Misumi went with Adomo to the academy. Misumi asked the clerk what kind of test it was, and the clerk told him that it was a test for recruiting new teachers for the academy. Misumi asked if this test could be switched so that Misumi could take an easier test, even if it was for hiring administrators. The clerk responded in a rude manner, telling him that the conditions are clear and written outside, and that today's test is for teacher recruitment only. This infuriated Adomo, who went on a rampage, trying to use his most powerful magic spell against the employee. But Misumi tried to calm him down so that things wouldn't get worse. In the end, Misumi decided to take the plunge and enter the exam room, no matter how difficult it was. Misumi sat down inside the room and the official came in and told them the method of the test. The test takers had to be able to collect 3 balls of different colors within 3 days. They had to use the tools given to them to catch the balls, and any student who used another tool to catch the balls would immediately explode the ball. The employee also told them that they would have to arrange for food and drink as the academy would not provide it during these days. Misumi thought it was easy and immediately started trying to catch the balls. He was surprised to learn that his spells and magical abilities were incompatible with the balls, and every time he tried to catch one, it exploded. When Misumi tried to use a less powerful spell, the balls exploded as well, and he began to despair, thinking that he would never be able to catch them. But he gathered his energy again and knew that he had to use the least amount of his magical energy, and when he did, he was able to catch 2 balls, and he was happy. Misumi then decided to enjoy his first meal in 2 days and went to bed afterward to rest from the tiring 2 days. The next morning, Misumi was surprised by a person dressed in black, and strangely enough, this person started attacking Misumi with a poison blade, but Misumi was able to use his magic spell that that makes him immune to poison, and then quickly ran towards the person and hit him with a powerful kick that knocked him down like a small ball. Misumi then managed to get the last ball and took it to the academy. There he learned that all the test takers had withdrawn after being threatened by the man in black. The test administrator gives Misumi the 3 balls, and the biggest surprise is that the balls are different colors, a success that demonstrates Misumi's superhuman strength, especially since no one has ever succeeded in this test with such finesse. Misumi receives his acceptance letter from the academy, and the academy grants him a license to open his new store. Then he is summoned to the academy to begin his mission as one of the teachers. Misumi tells Adomo that they will go to the academy at the end of the day, but first they need to go to a nearby restaurant to fill their bellies with delicious food. Misumi went to the restaurant where the girl he had met before worked, and Misumi recognized her as Luria. As soon as Luria saw him, she prepared all the delicious food to serve him. After Misumi and Adomo finished eating, they went to the academy, where they were greeted by the new teacher's receptionist, who began to explain the work system at the academy. She told Misumi that he would start working part-time until he was promoted, and then he would be able to work full-time. Shortly thereafter, a teacher named Bright came in and told them that he was a full-time teacher at the academy. Bright then told Misumi that he would send some of his students to him so that Misumi could start teaching them about magic. Bright also told Misumi that most of the students in this year's class were outstanding. Misumi thought to himself, "You're not telling me the truth, you idiot. I've beaten your students with my simplest spells before." Misumi then entered the library to familiarize himself with the books there and recognized the librarian named Eva. Misumi was amazed at how much Eva resembled Luria, and was surprised that Eva knew so much about him. But his amazement ended when he realized that they were sisters. Meanwhile, Miyu was trying to improve her cooking skills so that she could satisfy Misumi with all the delicious foods he loved. Although it was difficult at first, Miyu began to learn all the important details in the kitchen. A week later, Misumi was getting ready to start lecturing his magic classes to his students at the academy. But when the students saw Misumi, they felt that he was not a good teacher and no one thought he was strong in magic. But as usual, the female students were attracted by his beautiful features. But Misumi began to speak dryly to all the students and told them that the training would be hard. He then asked them about their abilities, and they told him that they were at a high level and that each student could control an element. However, Misumi told them that being able to control only one element made them only intermediate level, which naturally angered the students, who saw this as a harsh judgment by Misumi. Misumi then wanted to teach them a lesson, so he asked them to move away and watch the magical battle between him and Adomo. As soon as the battle began, all the students felt like idiots compared to Misumi, who used magic spells that only those who were advanced in magical level could use. So after this battle, all of their views changed and they felt that they had been too quick to judge Misumi. They also felt very excited for the start of Misumi's lectures. Strangely enough, a number of students were afraid of Misumi's magical power, so in the end there were only 5 students left. When Misumi saw that number, he thought to himself, where did the rest of the idiots go? But he didn't think much of it and told the students in front of him that he would do his best to improve them. The first one told him his name was Casper, the second one told him his name was Dana, the third one was a beautiful fighter named Abelia, the fourth one was Izumo, and the fifth one was Jin. Misumi immediately began to train these fighters to control their mana power, guiding them and correcting their mistakes. But the fighters were too weak, and when Misumi tried his simplest spells on them, they were all defeated. But even so, Misumi was a skilled teacher and was able to recognize the special qualities of each fighter. He then wrote a full report and submitted it to the academy administration in order to focus on improving each fighter's advantages in other subjects. We then saw a dangerous scene when the man in black, who had previously tried to prevent Misumi from reaching the balls, was seen talking to Bright, who told him to kill Misumi as soon as possible. It's been 2 weeks since Misumi became a teacher at the academy and opened his shop, and we saw him explaining to the staff where each product was located in the store. One of the things that surprised Misumi in that world was the existence of polygamy, with every girl he met asking him to marry her. Although Misumi had settled down, he was unaware of the dangers that awaited him. One day, Tomo and Miyu happened to pass by a strange house. Unbeknownst to them, the people in the house were plotting against Misumi. After Tomo enters, she manages to capture one of the people in the house and begins to question him. But when he told her that he would join her team and do whatever she wanted, she quickly realized he was a coward. As for Miyu, she was sure that the best way to Misumi was to satisfy his stomach, so she spent a long time learning how to cook and was introduced to new types of food she didn't know before. Miyu then met up with Hiki and the two of them kept talking to each other about fighting abilities, cooking, and other things. Hiki's assistants then joined the conversation, and they all began to wander around the forest. Although everything was going well, they were suddenly attacked by a huge, scary, green-colored monster. Miyu decides to do nothing and just watch as Hiki and her assistants stop the sudden attack. But she noticed that Hiki and her assistants' magical equipment was very primitive. Miyu also noticed that one of the fighters in Hiki's army, Verda, was fighting with great courage despite his poor equipment. But the attack was strong, and although Verda tried to stop the monster managed to seriously injure him, much to the dismay of the rest of the team. At that time, Miyu decided to give up the role of cook and went herself to stop the monster's attack. Although Hiki and her team thought it was impossible, Miyu managed to finish off the monster with minimal effort. She then turned her attention to Hiki and her team and said, "You idiots should know your own strength. During the battle, you must be able to quickly identify your enemy's weaknesses before he can finish you off." The fighters from Hiki's team were amazed at Miyu's superhuman ability in her battle against the monster. They were even more amazed because Miyu doesn't show any signs of strength. The fighters then asked her about their teammate Verda, and Miyu told them that his injury was not serious and could be treated. Suddenly, Miyu notices a big change in all the fighters, and before she can ask why, she is surprised by a new attack from the monster she just defeated and thought it was dead. Although the monster did manage to injure her, Miyu finally managed to get rid of it with difficulty. Miyu and the other fighters went to meet the various factions in Seki. There, Miyu looked everywhere for Misumi, especially since she was wearing a new dress and wished that Misumi had seen her in it. Miyu then turns to the leader of the dwarf tribe and tells him that he needs to make more solid new weapons because she was recently attacked by a dangerous monster and the old ones don't seem to be working anymore. Although Miyu was interested in fighting, she was still trying to improve her cooking with another fighter named Perrin. Over time, Miyu's level improved a lot, and Perrin told her that Misumi would fall in love with her food the first time they met. Meanwhile, Misumi and Adomo think of new ways to market his store's products and balance his life between his work as a teacher at the academy and his interest in his store. After Misumi finishes his time at the academy, he decides to return to the dwarf village, which is eager to welcome him back. Indeed, as soon as Misumi enters the village, everyone is overjoyed. Naturally, the jealousy battles between Tomo and Miyu, both of whom were gearing up to get Misumi's attention again. As soon as Misumi saw them, he thought to himself, "I thought I'd never go back to this foolishness again." Miyu began to show off her cooking skills to tease Tomo, so she served the soup she had made especially for Misumi and asked him to tell her what he thought of it after he finished eating it. When Misumi saw the soup, he thought it was similar to the soup he had eaten at Saich, but after tasting it, he told Miyu that it was delicious and different from anything else he had ever eaten. At that moment, Miyu felt that all her hard work over the past few months had not been in vain. Miyu gave Tomo a sly look as if to say, "The battle is over, you idiot. I'm the one who will win in the end." After Misumi finished eating, Tomo asked him to have a meeting because she wanted to give him some important information. Misumi heads to the meeting place and Tomo tells him what she encountered when she was inspecting the area where she suspected the monsters. Tomo tells Misumi that she met a hero in this area named Iwahashi, a hero of the Gratonian Empire, and that he is the same age as Misumi. Misumi asked her for a description, but Tomo told him that even though Iwahashi was a hero, his behavior was strange. Misumi decided to keep this important information and thanked Tomo for her diligence in compiling the information. When Tomo got too close to him, Misumi felt it was getting too hot. Misumi and his assistants noticed that the temperature was extremely high even at night, so Misumi decided to investigate. After much thought, Misumi came to the conclusion that he was the cause of the high temperatures because his traveling through different worlds had led him to use fog gates, which directly contributed to the change in weather. Miyu was very happy that Misumi liked her cooking, but when Perrin asked her to go with her on a dangerous mission, Miyu refused because she wanted to stay with Misumi. Perrin got angry and said, "You only love yourself." Although Perrin then tried to seduce Miyu by teaching her new ways of cooking that she didn't know before, Miyu remained steadfast in her stance. The next morning, Misumi went for a walk around the village and was amazed at the great development that had taken place in the village, where the dwarves and other groups were interested in planting lotus, clover and many plants, which led to an increase in the green area inside the village, which made the village look beautiful. Misumi then went to see how advanced the manufacture of weapons had become and was amazed to find a piece of cloth mixed with blood at the leader of the dwarf tribe who manufactures all weapons. When Misumi asked him about the cloth, the dwarf leader told him that Miyu had brought the cloth and asked her to improve the weapons because she had been injured by a dangerous monster. Adomo was standing with Misumi, and as soon as he heard this story from the dwarf leader, he confessed to them that he created the monster that attacked Miyu and told them that he created it by combining medium and low strength spirits, which led to the monster's strength. Misumi was annoyed by Adomo's words and said, "Where was your mind, you idiot, when you created such a powerful monster?" But Adomo kept apologizing. Misumi then learned from Emma that he had to meet people from new classes who wanted to join them, and Misumi went to meet them. Miyu never missed an opportunity to introduce new and delicious recipes to Misumi, who became a huge fan of Miyu's food. Just when Misumi thought everything was fine, the villains were plotting to plant their own minions among Misumi's assistants. Misumi tells everyone in the dwarf village that he will soon return to Rothsgard, but this news was heartbreaking for everyone in the village, especially Miyu and Tomo. Miyu asked Misumi why he was traveling back to Rothsgard, but Misumi told her that he had a lot of things to organize. Noticing Miyu's sadness, Misumi promised to return to the dwarf village as soon as possible. Misumi arrived in Rothsgard and met with Adomo, who began to update Misumi on all the developments at the store during his absence. Most of the news was good, as the store's sales were up compared to the first time Misumi opened the store. Misumi was happy and gave a bonus to all the employees. Misumi then went to check on his students and continue his magic lectures with them, and that day he received Rembrandt's daughter and his wife, who joined Misumi's team of students. Misumi was very happy to see them, especially since he had treated them in the first season. Misumi Misumi then began to explain the new lessons to the students and then moved on to practical application, dividing the students into two groups, with the first group facing a monster in the form of a blue lizard. The second group had to face Misumi in person, and despite the relative improvement Misumi noticed in some of them, he continued to advise them to pay attention to aiming their blows at the targets more accurately so that they could achieve a direct hit on the target. Although this was the first class for both Rembrandt's wife and daughter, they were very happy with the experience. But after the class, Misumi decided to get alone with Rembrandt's daughter, Karen. This is because he noticed that she speaks the language of demons, which means that she belongs to them. And of course we are aware that demons are Misumi's first enemy. Misumi sat with Adomo and Karen and kept questioning her about why she joined his team even though she was a demon. But Karen told him that she didn't want any evil and was just trying something new. Misumi then learns through Adomo that one of the generals in Segi wants to talk to him, so Misumi decides to go to him. Misumi met him and remembered that they had met before, and Misumi also remembered that this fighter's name was Lime. And Misumi said to himself, "Yes, I remember you, you disgusting name." Misumi then learns from their conversation that Lime is now working as a spy for Tomo. Lime assures him that Tomo has asked him to help him and provide him with important information. Misumi thanked him and told him that he urgently needed to investigate some things that had happened in the city, especially since several half-humans had recently been kidnapped. Misumi also told Lime that he had a strong suspicion that the Assassin's Guild was involved. After Lime left, Adomo spoke frankly with Misumi and told him that he should be wary of anything related to the demon army because they are deceitful, and that he should not believe everything they say. Misumi promised, and then decided to visit Rembrandt's house himself to get closer to his wife and daughter to see if they had bad intentions towards his team. Rembrandt's daughter and wife were amazed at how well Misumi treated them at home. Misumi told them that he was only strict in lectures. They thanked him profusely for saving them from the curse, but Misumi told them that he had only done his duty. Misumi deduced from the conversation that they had no evil intentions toward him or his team. He left their home and spoke to Adomo, telling him that everything would become clear in time. Lime, meanwhile, was scouring the streets of Rothsgard looking for those involved in the half-human kidnapping case, but was unable to come up with any significant information. After a while, he came to a mysterious-looking place with lots of new clothes. Lime felt that this place was a good lead, but suddenly he heard footsteps coming closer to him. Misumi is very interested in the outcome of Lime's investigation, but to Misumi's great surprise, he learns from the store employees that Lime hasn't returned since the last time they saw him. To make matters worse, everyone had lost the ability to communicate with him telepathically. Adomo felt betrayed by the demon army, and Misumi decided to start investigating on his own. As for Lime, the place he had arrived at belonged to the demon army, and it was indeed the place where they were abducting half-humans. But the footsteps he heard were those of a dangerous fighter. When Lime tried to communicate telepathically with Misumi, the fighter told him, "Sorry, stupid, you won't be able to communicate with anyone." And indeed, the fighter performed a magic spell that eliminated telepathy. When Lime tried to hit him with his sword, the fighter blocked the blow with ease and then delivered a powerful blow to Lime that knocked him down like a ragdoll. Lime thought that was the end of him, but he was surprised by the arrival of Eva, the Academy's librarian, who was able to defend him, and they moved out of the place. On their way out, they were surprised to find several half-humans who had been kidnapped. Lime and Eva were shocked, but there was no time to change anything. Adomo tried to summon Miyu and Tomo, but was surprised by the presence of Lime and Eva, who explained everything that had happened to them. Misumi then asked Eva to give him a detailed account of what happened, and Eva told him that she was following Lime because she sensed that he was in danger, which he was. Afterward, we saw Misumi reading Lime's report. Misumi was amazed at the strange fighter who appeared out of nowhere and was able to defeat Lime so easily. Misumi went to ask Eva about this fighter and if she knew anything about him, but Eva told him it was the first time she had seen this fighter. Misumi was surprised because he knew of Eva's involvement with the demon army in the past, but Eva told him that all the records of the demon army had been lost, so all the information in them had been lost. While Misumi is thinking about all this, Lime rushes in like a raging bull and enters the room Misumi was in to tell him that he has finally found the fighter who defeated him. In fact, Lime didn't find the fighter, but the fighter himself came to Misumi. Misumi quickly summoned Miyu and Tomo to be ready to meet the fighter. The fighter entered the room and told everyone that he was the president of the Adventurers Guild, to everyone's amazement, and then apologized to them for what he had done to Lime. Misumi begins to recognize the fighter, and before the fighter can say his name, Tomo does so and tells Misumi that his name is Lotto. Misumi deduced that Lotto was originally a dragon, but Tomo told him that Lotto was no ordinary dragon, but one of the strongest dragons who had never been defeated, which made Tomo very jealous. Lotto then began to explain to everyone how he had built the guild 1,000 years ago, and how he had built it on a system that would allow it to survive for a long time. He also told them that he deliberately gave the guild's membership cards a touch of the human world, taking inspiration from video games in the human world. Misumi took advantage of Lotto's presence and asked him about the possibility of returning to his home world. He told him that it was almost impossible because Misumi's destination is random and indeterminate. Lotto then left with Tomo in tow, and we noticed that Tomo wanted to ask him something she couldn't ask while Misumi was there. So when Tomo was alone with him, she asked him about the fact that a human who comes from the human world only lives for 100 years, and Loto confirmed the information, which made Tomo very sad because she is very attached to Misumi. But Loto also tells her that if there is a strong catalyst, Misumi may be able to move between worlds freely, allowing him to live a longer life. Although Misumi has always been wary of demons, Rembrandt's wife tells him that she wants to talk to him before she leaves town. Misumi met her at the dining room table and began to talk to him and then gave him many warnings. The first was about the 2 girls Misumi had hired at the store. She then warned him about Adomo, telling him that he was possessed, had no loyalty, and could betray Misumi at any time. When Misumi told this to Miyu and Tomo, they told him that this information could be wrong and that he should be wary of everyone because not everything he hears is true. Misumi also told them that he was very concerned about Eva's safety and didn't want to do anything to harm her. Tomo and Miyu were naturally irritated and said to themselves, "Where are we with this sudden tenderness?" Misumi then manages to capture Bright after uncovering his plot against the demihumans. After Misumi's henchman tied Bright up, he walked in and said, "Did you think you were going to get away with it? Welcome to my world." Bright tried to convince Misumi of his point of view, but Misumi didn't give him a chance and got rid of him. The students on Misumi's team at the academy were working hard to raise their level as the final exam approached, but Misumi set a very difficult practical test for them. He brought another monster, also a blue lizard, into the training arena. Although the students were well prepared, the monsters quickly defeated them. The students quickly gathered their strength and attacked the monsters, but the monsters suddenly transformed into even more ferocious creatures, and their blows to the students were even more brutal. Although the students were defeated, Misumi praised their progress and even apologized to them for subjecting them to a difficult test that could have led to a real disaster if one of them had been seriously injured. What was surprising to the students was that most of them were originally dragons, yet they were beaten so badly by the supposedly much weaker lizards. But Misumi corrected them, telling them that blue lizards in particular are more powerful than dragons. This is because they rely on a special type of mana that the dragons can only use a quarter of, which explains why the lizards are superior to them. Summer is the time when all beings, regardless of age or species, mature, and it is also the time when the academy shuts down. Despite Misumi's advanced level, he always wanted more, so he went to Lotto to talk to him about his desire to increase his mana power. But Lotto told him that his mana was fine, and when Misumi was determined to gain any additional power, Lotto gave him a rare book on how to increase power. Misumi then wanted more information, so he went to the library, where he met Eva, who gave him a rare book on increasing strength. Misumi noticed that the book contained many unique theories on the subject. Misumi decides to return to the dwarf village to spend the summer vacation with them. There he met Emma, who told him about the activities he would be doing over the summer. The first of these activities was a battle against the Winged Ones, a new class that Misumi had accepted to live with them. So Misumi started planning and preparing for this battle, but the problem was that when Misumi tried to use his mana outside of his body, he lost consciousness. Although Misumi loved living in the dwarf village, what he really missed was the delicious food that Miyu served him, and so he ate these foods with an open appetite. We also noticed that Miyu still has the same cunning and maliciousness. She deliberately made the food full of spices that were incompatible with Tomo's nature in order to keep her away from the food and be able to sit alone with Misumi. Misumi delved deeper into the books he had acquired. He was finally able to use the maximum power of the mana outside his body without losing consciousness, which made him feel ready for any battle because the mana outside his body was like a shield protecting him from everything around him. The summer vacation was half over and Misumi was still going through the books he had with him to learn more information. One day, Misumi learns that all the groups living in the dwarf village have put on a show and want him to go to the auditorium to see it. Misumi agrees and goes to the venue, where he learns that the factions want to do a demonstration in which they all cooperate to destroy a very large magic stone. Each class began to help the others, and Misumi noticed that they were becoming more organized in their attacks. After each class was able to perform their part in the demonstration, the only thing left to do was to destroy the stone. But that didn't happen in the end due to its extreme hardness. Miyu decides to step in and destroy the stone herself. But before Miyu could move towards the stone, Adomo appeared with a very powerful sword and started casting spells on the stone. He then took a few steps back and shot like an arrow towards the stone, destroying it with a single swing of his super sword. However, a large chunk of the stone remained in place, and Misumi decided to take care of it himself. He summoned all his mana, retreated a few steps, and charged like a raging bull toward the stone, and with a single blow, destroyed it and reduced it to small pebbles. Everyone in the theater was amazed at the sheer force with which Misumi smashed the stone. Even though Misumi was happy with his power, there were those who were silently watching Misumi and wondering whether or not his power would threaten their existence. One day, as Misumi was walking through the forest, a super armor was thrown at him that almost killed him, and Misumi was amazed. But his amazement was cut short when one of the monsters spoke in a frightening voice and told Misumi, "We will let you live this time only if you swear to leave the forest. But if you stay here and insist on challenging us with your superpower, you should know that your end is near." Misumi then began to gather information about the voice he heard in the forest. He realized that the voice was coming from the orcs because they had been attacked in the forest not long ago. When When they saw Misumi's extraordinary strength, they thought Misumi was the one who had attacked them, so they began to threaten him. Knowing this important information, Misumi decided to rectify the misunderstanding and went himself to talk to the orc class, but he couldn't find them at first. Halfway through the forest, Misumi was surprised by an extremely large bear that began to attack him. Misumi activated the mana outside of his body and was able to easily block the attack. Misumi was then surprised by a pack of fierce wolves attacking him. Misumi then started talking to all of them and told them that he only came to apologize for what happened. But Misumi was surprised that the bear and the wolves attacked him. They told him that they did so because the force Misumi used to destroy the stone was so great that they thought Misumi was trying to take control of the area and eliminate them. Misumi tells them that this is not true, and after a friendly session, the bear and wolves offer to be his partners, and Misumi agrees, and they join him. After the creatures of the forest felt that Misumi was peaceful, they began to recognize him. One day, Misumi saw a bird so large that it frightened him. Tomo prepared to pounce on the bird, but Misumi told her to wait. The bird flew until it was within striking distance and landed on a tree branch. It then began to talk to Misumi, telling him that it was called the boulder bird and that it was ready to start watching the sky for Misumi, and that it would call itself the stone bird afterward. At that time, Adomo was planning to defeat the half-dragon and spoke to Karn and asked her why she couldn't go back to her homeland, and she told him that she couldn't at the moment. Karen asked Adomo the same question, and he kept reminiscing, telling her that there was a girl named Miranda who lived with him in the same village as him. When Karen asked him what she was like, Adomo told her that she was so strong and brave that she was able to fend off all the enemies that attacked the village. When Karen heard this, she thought Miranda was Adomo's teacher, but Adomo corrected her and told her that Miranda was his first love. Karen was surprised and asked Adomo why she wasn't with him. Adomo's tone changed to sadness and he told her that one day they were asked to check out the forest. In the meantime, Adomo and Miranda came upon a mysterious wizard's workshop. When they entered, they were attacked by a huge monster that quickly drove Adomo away. But to Adomo's surprise, Miranda fearlessly fought off the monster, and Adomo never saw her again. Karen was moved by this story and Adomo told her that from that day on, he vowed to find Miranda again and promised himself to be as strong as she was. One of the first steps towards finding Miranda again was to defeat the half-dragons. So Adomo asked Misumi to summon a herd of half-dragons so that Adomo could defeat them, and at the same time Misumi would take one of them to his students to fight against him. Misumi takes Adomo at his word and activates his power outside his body, and manages to find a herd of half-dragons. After destroying most of them, he lured the rest to Adomo and his students. Misumi's students were so excited that they were going to do battle against a real dragon-like creature that they began to cooperate with each other in order to win their battle. Despite the strength of the dragon, the Misumi students were confident and said, "Come to us, you idiot, we will write your doom." At the end of the battle, they were able to finish off the dragon-like creature, and they were overjoyed. Misumi himself was amazed at how far they had come. Not far away, we saw Miranda enter the same sorcerer's workshop she had arrived at with Adomo, and we were surprised to learn that it belonged to Lotto. So Miranda decides to take revenge on all the dragons and finally finish off Lotto. The fall season has arrived, which means the Academy Festival that everyone has been waiting for. Everyone comes from all over to enjoy the festival. Misumi wanted to capitalize on the occasion, so he went into his shop and started preparing the products that are unique to his shop. Misumi then learns that a temple priest named Shinai wants to meet him, so Misumi goes to meet him. After introducing himself, the priest began talking to Misumi about his rare medicinal products. The priest then asked Misumi to give the temple some of these products due to the recent outbreak of strange diseases. After Misumi listened to the priest's talk, he thought to himself, "What does this idiot want to do? Is he trying to bribe me or something? It doesn't matter, I'll figure it all out myself." Misumi didn't want to lose the temple, so he decided to balance things out and told the priest that he would go himself and the alchemist who was helping him to present all the details to the temple priests and see what they would be able to offer them. On the appointed day, Misumi arrived at the temple and met the high priest, who began to ask him about the nature of his business and how long he had been in business. Although Misumi felt like he was being interrogated, he decided to answer and told the high priest that he had been in the business for 3 years. The high priest then asked him which company was backing him. When Misumi told him that it was Rembrandt's company, the high priest got annoyed and told him that this company had ideas against the temple, and Misumi said to himself, "What business is it of mine? You idiot, I'm only interested in business." So Misumi tried to get out of the trap by telling the high priest that he was just a merchant and not interested in religious matters. The high priest tells him that Rembrandt's company is satanic and that Rembrandt's wife and daughter were cursed by Satan. Although most of the priest's words were true, Misumi felt that there was some kind of manipulation, so he decided to ask the priest directly what the temple wanted. The priest told him that the temple wanted to do business with Misumi's store. Misumi promised to think about it. One day as Misumi was walking down the street, he felt like he was being watched, and it was true. A few moments later, a large group of Assassin's Guild fighters, dressed in black uniforms and face coverings, attacked him. "Where have you been, you idiots? I've been waiting for you for a long time." Misumi was surprised to realize that the same fighter who had attacked Miyu in the past was with them, so Misumi activated his power outside his body and managed to finish finish them all off. Misumi then felt very agitated after being attacked by these fighters, so he decided to go archery, as this was what calmed him down. While Misumi was busy shooting arrows, Tomo came in to tell him that she had come up with a good plan to control the weather. The summary of the plan was that they would open a fog gate during the fall, which would regulate the temperature again. On the day of the festival, Misumi overslept and then freaked out to discover that he was late for the start of the festival, so he rushed off to witness everything from the beginning. When Misumi arrived at his shop, he was thrilled to see that people were queuing up to buy his rare products. Afterward, Misumi went to enjoy a delicious meal served by Miyu. Although everyone was happy at the festival, at the same time, there were many evil plans being hatched to eliminate Misumi and all his followers. On the second day of the Academy Festival, we learned that this day is dedicated to testing the students in terms of behavior, speech, and other moral qualities that they acquire at the Academy. Misumi met Rembrandt and his wife Lisa, who was resplendent in her gorgeous blue dress, and Misumi felt the amount of love between Rembrandt and his wife. Afterward, Misumi was surprised by some female fighters from the demon army asking him to come in for a talk. Even though it's dangerous, Misumi decides to go and talk to them. After he sat down with one of them, he asked her if this was the first time they had met or if they had met before. The fighter replied that it was the first time and told him that her name was Siritsu, and that she belonged to the Lorelei Federation. When Misumi asked her about the Laurel Union, she told him that it was a union of 3 nations that had become one. Although you deny knowing Laurel, I'm sure you know her very well, Siritsu said to Misumi. Misumi asked her why. Siritsu told him that the main reason for her belief was the name of Misumi's shop, which only sages call it. Misumi said that he was not one of the sages. Siritsu tells him that she doesn't mean the literal meaning of a sage. Then she makes it even more subtle and tells him that she also knows that the 2 heroes who were sent were originally sages. And Misumi said to himself, what a cunning woman, she suspects me of being one of those 2 heroes. But we noticed that Misumi decided to stand his ground and assured her that he didn't know anything about what she was saying. Sensing that Misumi wasn't going to add anything new, Siritsu excused herself and told Misumi that she was looking forward to meeting again. Before she left, Siritsu asked Misumi to explain the meaning of the name of his store. Misumi told her that the name of the store was originally given to a plant that has many medicinal benefits. Afterward, Lily, Princess of Gritonia, learns about the Laurel Union representatives meeting with Misumi and summons them, asking them what was involved. However, the representatives of the Laurel League told the princess that the meeting was normal, and that Misumi didn't tell them anything of value. We then realized from Lily's conversation with Siritsu that Lily is very interested in all of Misumi's affairs. Even though Lily already has her own spies within the Laurel League, she tried to trap Siritsu to get more information from her. I know you're trying to set me up, but I promise it won't work, Siritsu said to herself. Lily then surprised her with a question about gunpowder, and although the question caught Siritsu by surprise, she managed to handle the situation intelligently and told her only some superficial information. At the end of the day, we saw Rembrandt giving Misumi a lot of thanks because all the Rembrandt family members who were Misumi's students had changed their behavior for the better after joining the academy and joining Misumi's team. While Misumi was talking to Rembrandt, a student from the Hayama class rushed up to Misumi and spoke in a disrespectful manner, threatening Misumi and his students and telling him that he would soon finish them off. Misumi didn't care and told Rembrandt and his wife that it was okay and that he would take care of it himself. Miyu continues to serve her delicious recipes to Misumi, who is addicted to her food. But as usual, Tomo and Miyu weren't getting along, so they started fighting again. Misumi yelled at them, "Stop fighting, you 2 idiots, we're all interested in the festival." The princess then contacted Lotto and tried to get more information about Misumi. Lotto gave her everything he knew, and from their conversation we learned that this is not the first collaboration between Lotto and the princess. Misumi told his students that they would have a magical battle against each other at the end of the festival, especially since it will be on strict terms and they will be forbidden to use most of their spells. Misumi then met with Rembrandt, who told him to hurry up and go to the Merchants Guild in order to start expanding his own shop. Misumi was eager to see the magical battles that would take place between his team members, so he thanked Rembrandt and promised to go to the Merchants Guild as soon as possible. Shortly afterward, we saw the announcer announcing the start of the Rothsgard battle and promising all viewers that it would be a very powerful battle. Misumi was anxious to watch the battle, but at the same time he was thinking about everything that had happened and wondering whether he would eventually be able to return to his home world or not. Although Misumi was excited to watch the magical battle, he was very worried about his students so that none of them would get hurt. On the other hand, even though the students had a great relationship because of the fellowship, each of them tried to give the best performance possible in the battle. The battles continued one after another, and Misumi noticed that the level of the students was comparable, and that each of them was able to recite the spells correctly. We then saw a battle between Casper and Jin, who were very close in level, but in the end, Jin was able to win due to his superior speed. Rembrandt's daughter Rembrandt also managed to beat her counterpart in their battle. However, we noticed that most of the audience doesn't like the Rembrandt family, so there was a lot of talk that Rembrandt's daughter must have taken advantage of her family's influence and bought expensive magical items. Jin advanced to the next round of the battle and started a new fight against a very strong Dania, but this time Jin was also able to win. On the other hand, Rembrandt's daughter qualified qualified for the final of the witch category and managed to win the match to the applause of most of the audience, who began to sympathize with her and also felt that her level was already advanced. Jin, on the other hand, was preparing to play the final against one of the strongest fighters. The battle between the two of them began, with each of them charging towards their opponent like a raging bull. However, it was a one-sided battle because from the very first moment, Jin was able to completely dominate his opponent, so much so that he deliberately knocked out his opponent's sword twice in a row, and then surprised him with a powerful kick from his foot that knocked him out like a small child falling out of bed. The fight ended shortly thereafter with Jin's victory to the cheers of the crowd, but then we saw the fighter whom Jin had defeated swearing and vowing to kill Jin soon. The judging panel for this magical battle has decided that the winner of the mage category will fight the winner of the fighter category. In other words, we'll be watching a fateful match to determine the champion of the entire tournament. The match will be between Jin and his son Rembrandt. The battle between them began with an attack from Rembrandt's daughter, who knew how to use all of her spells perfectly, so she attacked Jane, who was amazed at her magical ability. Rembrandt's daughter actually managed to win the entire tournament, and Misumi was delighted at the tremendous progress his students had made in the tournament. While Misumi was thinking about his future, he received some disturbing news from the Merchants Guild. Misumi learned through Rembrandt that the head of the guild wanted to meet with him as soon as possible, but what bothered Misumi was that he would have to go to the guild the next day, the day his entire team would parade in front of the entire crowd. Although the fighters were saddened that Misumi would not be there, they got together and decided to put on a good show for everyone. The next day, Misumi went to the headquarters of the Merchants Guild, but found the guildmaster's tone very harsh. The guildmaster began to interrogate Misumi about the goods and products he sells in his store. When the manager finished this investigation, Misumi asked him why, and the manager told him that there were a lot of disturbing reports about the store's products. Misumi told him that everything in his store is clear to everyone. The manager spoke more sharply and said, "We at the Merchants Guild are surprised that you have all these goods and products and we don't see any carts transporting the products for you." Misumi finally understood why he was standing in front of the Merchants Guild manager. The guild is surprised that there's no visible transportation of goods in front of them. This, of course, is because Misumi is transporting goods by utilizing his mana power, which allows him to travel between worlds. The problem was that Misumi couldn't tell the Merchants Guild about it, or they'd shut him down immediately. The guildmaster then began to hint to Misumi about his cooperation with the temple. Misumi then said to himself, "You're a bunch of blackmailers, each of you trying to fulfill your own personal purpose at the expense of my store." The guildmaster then issued a very unfair order to Misumi, that Misumi must first submit all of his store's cargo transportation data, and then pay the syndicate 90% of his profits. Shocked by this unjust ruling, Misumi began to criticize and blame the syndicate and its director, telling the director that this was outright blackmail. But the manager remained adamant and told Misumi that this was the price for not being clear with the syndicate from the beginning. He also told him that if he didn't pay up, the guild would close his shop and Misumi would go back to Tsaich again. Misumi returned to speak with Tomo and Miyu, who were galvanized against the Merchants Guild and asked Misumi to go there to take revenge on the manager, but Misumi asked them to calm down. Misumi then decides to go for a peaceful solution and also decides to pay the guild what he owes, in order to keep his relationship with everyone on good terms and so that one day he can return to his home world. We fast forward to another state called Ensland, where the warrior Island Hobiles, scion of the famous family that led the great state of Lemia, promises young Loria that he will try to fix what the nobles of his state have messed up. We then return to Misumi, who was still upset that Rambadant had refused to treat him as a normal merchant, but he quickly remedied the situation. He contacted Rona and asked her to keep the demons out of Rothsgard because he began to fear for his students after issues arose regarding a student with supernatural powers, and of course, Misumi was worried about Jin and Abby. Misumi was then convinced that he had to leave town, so he asked the student leader of the rival team to meet him in a neighboring room. Of course, she thinks he's just asking her to flirt with her, before Misumi shocks her and tells her that he wants to leave town and can't think of a better person to check on his students for the rest of the tournament. In the arena, everyone was talking about how well the students were competing against each other and praised Jin and Miss Ra's fights. Miss Ra was ready to fight, but only because Tomoe had promised him that she would train with him after the tournament if he was still alive, of course. While Miss Ra was talking with his friends, a guard interrupted them and told them that the competition was about to start again, and that they would have to win the remaining matches if they wanted to secure a spot in the final match. Shiko sat in the spectator seats to watch his team fight, but what caught his attention was an opposing fighter wearing a strange-looking amulet. Shiko told everyone that this fighter was suspicious, as he was wearing the amulet as a disguise to increase his magical power, which would explain why he was so much more powerful than the others. Of course, this Islandgand had a power that no one, not even Misumi himself, knew how to explain, as the fighter recalled his training days with Hibiki, whom he reluctantly left his city after she assured him that she would wait for him to return from competitions and then they would train together again. He also remembers Loria, when he first met her and introduced himself and tried to remind her of when they played together when they were young and she wore the same mascot. But soon, some guys showed up who made fun of Loria because her whole town was destroyed by demons and killed her whole family. Islangan quickly stopped them and wondered why a princess like Loria was in such a miserable town. The bullies started making fun of Loria for running away from her city and not fighting like a princess should, and just worked as a waitress in this new city. But Loria fought back, telling them that people like them couldn't stand up to the enemy and had never seen a real war, so they had no right to blame her. Islangan was standing watching the situation from afar when one of the academy's students sneaked in and told him that the academy was developing a new magical drug that would increase the user's strength exponentially. Of course, Islangan agreed to take the drug just to make him stronger and be able to protect Loria. But little did he know that the drug had many side effects and that he would be exploited by the drug. Anyway, back to the competition at the academy, where Islangan kept beating up any fighter who got in his way, until Jin himself shows up to fight him, and Jin actually manages to land a few blows on him. Islangan was so badly shaken that Jin asked the referee if he should continue the fight since his opponent looked so tired. But the referee told him that his opponent was still in good shape and that he should continue to attack. Of course, Islangan was still strong, but Jin, with the help of one of his team's fighters, managed to combine their strength and landed a powerful blow that sent Islangan flying through the air. Only then did Jin and his companions realize that Islangan's greatest weakness was his inability to defend himself in the air. As Islangan fell to the ground unable to move, the masters decided to start the victory ceremony, as there was no way Islangan would be able to continue fighting. Suddenly, without warning, Islangan woke up again and began to summon unprecedented mana power that left everyone in shock, including Misumi himself, who belatedly realized that Rona had only promised to keep the demons out of his city, not this one. As Islangan surrendered his soul to the demons so that he could summon that powerful mana, he remembered Loria and kept apologizing to her for not being able to control that power and luring him into using the drug that turned him into a monster. Of course, this transformation was a surprise to everyone watching the fight, as they witnessed the demons taking over Islangan's body, who seemed unable to control himself at all. Islangan's body also began to swell, which caused panic even in the streets outside the academy, and everyone began to flee the place, especially after Islangan transformed into a full-fledged monster. Only then did the academy's fighters realize that they were no match for him, and they too began to flee the scene. Of course, Misumi didn't run away this time and stayed to watch from the audience seats. That is, until one of the teachers comes to him and tells him that he has to evacuate quickly because the demons are not only confined to the academy, but have also reached the perimeter of the city. Only then does Misumi realize that he needs to act quickly and carefully before things get completely out of hand. But before Misumi could do anything, he asked the girls to answer the question he had asked them beforehand. Do you really want to take back the kingdom that has been taken over by demons? Of course, the girls assured him that they did, especially Loria, who missed her kingdom like never before. That signal was enough for Misumi to tell the rest of his students to get ready to fight the demons. At first, Misumi asked Shiki if they could free Islangan from the demons' clutches. Shiki told him that it was a difficult task that he didn't want to participate in, so Misumi asked him to just keep an eye on the situation in the city. Misumi also decided to request some fighters from other parallel worlds. As soon as Tomoe heard those words, she got excited and told Misumi that everything they are going through is just a test. If they can protect the city, everyone will owe them love and loyalty. It would also rid them of many undesirable merchants. At the time, Rona was standing there not knowing whether to grieve for Misumi after dragging him into the battle or rejoice that the demons had taken control of a new human state. Just then, the demon leader arrived and told her that the work on the ring had reached the final stages and that they would soon have the opportunity to take over another human kingdom. At the same time, Misumi was preparing to start his plan when Rambidant appeared in front of him, who was also shocked by what was happening in the city. But then he apologized to Misumi and told him that he had to go to the Merchants Guild to find out how they were faring in the wake of the disaster. Before he left, he asked Misumi what happened between him and the merchant captain, and Misumi told him that the captain refused to recognize him as a merchant in the first place. So Rambidant decided to leave 2 magical guards to protect Misumi during the event. After Rambidant left, Misumi saw the Purple Coats, the academy's most powerful guards, arrive to fight against the mighty beast. They immediately began casting elemental gathering spells for war, first with the Flame Sword, then the Ice Spear, then the Dust Fang, and finally the Storm Cross. But the monster was immune to 3 of these spells and was able to absorb the water magic, so these spells were of no use to them. On the contrary, they only increased the power of the monster, which took out all the fighters with ease. This angered Misumi, who told Shiki that he had been unkind to his students and had not trained them properly to deal with such difficult situations. Misumi then asked Tomoe and Shiki to ask their students to stay as long as possible on the battlefield, at least until they gain more experience. Misumi then went with Tomoe to the Metavirgin seats, where they found some of the princes who did not know how to escape, as well as their old friend Lotto. The headmaster of the academy appeared in the crowd and asked Misumi and Tomoe what their plan was. Tomoe told him that she was going to move everyone to a safe place. But of course, the principal was skeptical of her ability to transport people, so Lotto volunteers as if he's never met them before and agrees to make himself a guinea pig for Tomoe's attempt to transport the guests. Of course, it worked, and Tomoe volunteered volunteered to transport all the guests, but the king decided to stay put and even asked Misumi to join him in the war in hopes of convincing Eilingan to come to his senses. The king and Eilingan's father began to plead with Eilingan to come to his senses, but Eilingan continued to attack the warriors without stopping. What got Misumi's attention was the arrival of a new monster. Of course, the prince tried to look brave and went straight for the monster, only to be knocked to the ground by Misumi, who saved him from a devastating fall. Abby then decided to use all of her power after realizing that the only spell that could harm Eilingan was the fire spell, so she told everyone to leave and get as far away as possible. She first used the float spell to fly over Eilingan, who was still suffering from the attack of Abby's teammates, before Abby hit him with a fiery arrow with all her strength and fell to the ground, not realizing what exactly happened with the monster and whether or not she managed to finish it off. Of course, everyone rushes to her to help her after she used all of her mana to fight Eilingan. After the battle, Misumi personally went to Eilingan's father to apologize to him for what happened to his son after Abby defeated him. The man took it all in stride and praised Misumi and his students for bravely facing the threat of the monsters. He even offered Misumi the chance to recruit them as mercenaries. But first they had to come up with a plan to evacuate everyone in the city for fear of the monsters' repeated attacks, which didn't seem to be ending anytime soon. Misumi then went to check on Abby, who had used up all of her mana casting the spell on the arrow, leaving her exhausted. Meanwhile, Jin was still angry that he couldn't finish off Eilingan with his power, and he was still more angry that he had fought so fiercely in front of his friend Eilingan. But Misumi, in his usual wisdom, was able to take that worry off Jin's chest and told him to rest for a while because the real battles were about to begin after the mutant monsters took over the perimeter of Roxgard and some of the surrounding cities. Upon hearing this terrifying news, everyone panicked, so Misumi realized that his students were still tired from the battle against Eilingan, so he asked Tomoe to watch over them while he went out to spend some time in the city to check things out. The first place Misumi went was his shop, which had been completely demolished with not even a sign left. But Misumi realizes that he needs to think positive and not dwell on the negative, and maybe this is a sign for him to start a new business venture. Before Misumi could recover from the shock, he heard someone screaming for help coming from the pleasure neighborhood. So Misumi rushes over, sees a broken window and realizes that's where the problem lies, so he rushes over. When Misumi arrives, he sees one of the monsters trapping some of the girls who work at the place. One of them is a girl named Isekai, who tells Misumi to leave the place immediately because he's a little kid. Misumi introduces himself as one of the teachers of the academy and asks her to quickly evacuate the place and wait for him downstairs to see what can be done with the monster. After the girls left, Misumi immediately began to use his brute strength, which enabled him to sever all of the monster's limbs. But that wasn't too much trouble for the monster, which easily regained its arms before Misumi pounced on it with a blow that finished it off. After the battle, Misumi went down to the street where he saw Isekai still waiting for him, who was impressed by his strength but also by his wealth as a famous merchant who owns a famous chain of products. Misumi then asked her to go to the slums because it was the only safe place so far, and reassured her that some of the academy's teachers were regulating the entry of humans into those neighborhoods. Tomoe, on the other hand, was on her way with Shiki to protect the rest of the friends, but she suddenly stopped and told Shiki to continue on his way while she went to take care of something urgent. Tomoe returned to the academy to check on Eilingan, who had completely transformed into a large piece of meat but was still able to speak. He told Tomoe that even though he turned into a monster, he also lost the battle and couldn't win or even express his love for Loria. Eilingan also told her that there is still hope for humanity as long as Hibiki is alive, as she is the only one who can create a peaceful world for humans, and the rest can only go so far. Tomoe didn't care about all this because she only came back to finish off Eilingan after angering her young master, Misumi. So she surprised Eilingan with powerful attacks that he couldn't block or even try to avoid before she finished him off and left the academy. Back in the city, Misumi was meeting with the other teachers to hear the latest news. The first news was the confirmation that there were about 80 mutated monsters around the city. In addition, the city is now isolated from any other cities after the monsters cut off all communication networks and destroyed the anti-jamming devices distributed by the teachers of the academy throughout the city. The only good news was that the Purple Coats and some of their trainers had formed combat units to start fighting immediately while they waited for the rest of the countries to send military supplies to the city. Lotto interrupted their conversation and told them that the main issue was the growing number of mutants who had started distributing drugs to the population to try to convert them as well. So some of the teachers came up with a new idea: look for amulets similar to the one Eilingan was using and collect them immediately, as well as isolate the bearers of those amulets, because the academy found out that the mutants were experimenting on humans, making them a large number of half-mutants. After hearing all this news, Misumi's mind was scattered as he couldn't figure out why the demons and mutants were attacking the academy and putting the whole city in a state of panic. Misumi then passed by a cat named Paul and asked him about the situation, but Paul assured him that the city was looking better, and that so far the demon attack had not been as strong as he had expected. As Misumi went out into the street, he met some of his students, who he told to get ready because they would definitely be involved in this war with the Purple Coat forces, and then he ran into Isekai, who complimented him on his strength and courage and promised him that she would tell her boss about him and get him a job. Of course, that wasn't a good idea for someone of Misumi's abilities and reputation, but he didn't want to embarrass Isekai. Misumi then went to the academy director's office, who began scolding Misumi for initiating an evacuation plan for the citizens without consulting him. But soon Princess Layla and Suristo entered and told the headmaster that Misumi had helped in the fight and had shown unrivaled bravery, and asked him to pardon him. At the urging of the two ladies, the headmaster decided to turn a blind eye to Misumi's actions. However, he told him that he had a mission to eradicate mutants in the northeastern part of the city, and in order to do so, he had the right to use his students and assistants. After the king left, Layla told him that the other cities had begun to mobilize reinforcements and the rest of the soldiers must be about to arrive in their city. Misumi didn't think of it as a daunting task, but rather as a perfect opportunity for his trading company, which would gain a great deal of publicity if it could protect the city from mutant attacks. Misumi then went to the residence of his students to check on them, but found them too tired to even stand a fight. Moreover, supplies from the other cities had not yet arrived, and the number of mutants in the city had not yet decreased. As soon as the students realized this, they showed great courage and told Misumi that they were ready for the fight, which would not be delayed for long this time. But those words were not enough for Misumi, who still feared that if he went to the northeast of the city and left the dorms unprotected, because some of the students might turn into demons after the demon attack and things would only get worse. But after all, the students assured him that they would do everything in their power to defend the academy. Misumi felt a little relieved and told Aqua and Iris to take care of the students until his return. Misumi then set out to join the rest of the teachers, and on his way to the northeast, where the Merchants Guild is located, Misumi's team encountered some monsters on the street. But of course, with Misumi's strength and the rest of his classmates, the monsters were no problem, and they got rid of them with ease. Finally, Misumi and his friends arrived at the guild headquarters where Rambident was, who wanted to check on his daughters first. Rambident then inquired about the condition of Misumi's shop, who told him that the place was completely destroyed, but that he had managed to move the goods and all the employees there before the attacks began. Misumi also wondered about the extent of the damage to the guild, as he had seen many signs of looting on his way here, but Rambident told him he couldn't account for all the damage because he had no one to protect him. Patrick interrupted his assistant and told him that these were confidential matters that shouldn't be shown to a failed merchant like Misumi, but then Rambident told him off. Misumi then explained the situation to them and told them that he was now in charge of cleaning up the place from the mutants, of which there were only 9 left. To reassure Rambident, he told him that just on his way to the syndicate headquarters, he had eliminated at least 15 mutants, so the rest wouldn't be a problem. Rambident's demeanor changed and he told him that the syndicate would support him with all its might. After Misumi left the syndicate to assess the situation on the streets of the city, Rambident had a long talk with Patrick as he was amazed at Misumi's behavior. How could a kid so young and seemingly failing as a merchant wipe out so many mutants and even willingly go to war against them? That's when Patrick told him that Misumi wasn't just a failed trader, but Patrick also had another business theory. He wanted Rambident to profit from the war in any way he could. Although Rambident was afraid of the move, as the man still had a conscience, not like the loser named Patrick. But Patrick finally managed to convince him that a successful trader is one who can make a profit in any circumstance. Back to Misumi, who was waiting for Tomoe, who was on a mission to collect amulets from the city. When she returned, she found Mio in a good mood as she was competing with Shiki to see who could kill the most monsters. In the meantime, Misumi decided to visit the west side, called the Artisan District, which he knew had a lot of mutant activity. In that neighborhood, Master Mundo was teaching a monster a lesson, and even turning them into trees as a form of rebuilding the city. Even after the monster came back to life, Mundo managed to kill it for good this time. The situation at the academy was maddening, as the headmaster felt that the war in the city would become more difficult, so he asked all the students, even the novices, to go out to war. Of course, Aqua and Ares refused and put up a wall around the academy so that no one could get out. But of course, Misumi managed to get through the wall and asked for an update. Aqua tells him that mutant activity is concentrated in the wealthy area of the city, so Misumi asked Tomoe to restore telepathy between the city and the rest of the city, which she was able to do. As soon as telepathy was restored, the king imposed a curfew because the return of telepathy would make them more vulnerable to demon attacks. But through telepathy, the king knew that the demons were on their way to the royal capital, where they wanted to end the entire kingdom in a concentrated attack, which meant that everything that was happening in Rothschild was a ruse to keep the academy's warriors away from the royal capital. So everyone had to try to get back home to gather armies for the war, and of course, only Misumi could transport them. So as soon as he appeared, the king told him that he had a request to make. The king explained to Misumi that the demons had launched 2 simultaneous attacks on the royal capital, and Rona's, the imperial capital. The demons were able to transform their forms into humans and move their forces without anyone's knowledge. This development in making plans and executing them was alarming to everyone. The remarkable development of the demons is no small thing, and the king and Princess Layla must quickly return to the kingdom to save what can be saved. However, Maitomi had bad news. The magical sword responsible for transporting people had been severely depleted during the deceptive war in the city, meaning it would no longer be able to transport people. The king is unhappy and tells Misumi that he will reward him handsomely if he can transport them, but if he refuses, he will punish him. Misumi casts a spell to transport Princess Layla and the king, who decides to leave Joshua to help the city's warriors in their defense. After the king leaves, Misumi and Tomoe make fun of him for falling for their trick, as the sword is not a real sword, but they wanted to deceive him to get the reward. Misumi then takes a walk with his friend, who tells him that this war is a big hoax. Even the attack on Ruinas may be a hoax, as he believes that the real goal of the demons is to destroy the kingdom of Lemia and eliminate the hero of that kingdom. This hero has unprecedented mana that enables him to turn his enemies into puppets who do nothing but obey his orders. However, the kingdom of Lemia has a different mana power that produces heroes with determination and willpower unlike any other kingdom. Misumi wanted to help these heroes even though he had no personal connection to them, but he couldn't move on now that he had tricked the king into thinking that the sword of transformation had been destroyed. While Misumi was thinking out loud with his friend Shiki, he was summoned by Supreme Master Rona again. When he came up, Rona asked him to take part in the war and help the hero of Lemia. Of course, Misumi couldn't restrain his childish behavior and told her that he didn't have the motivation to help the heroes and that he might side with the demons if he went to Lemia. Rona realizes that Misumi is ready to fight, but he wants something in return. When she asks him what he wants, Misumi doesn't have a ready answer, which causes Rona to scold him. That's when Shiki intervened and asked her to give Misumi the gift of speaking the common language. She told him clearly that he must fight alongside the hero of Lemia and take over Stella's castle, and if he couldn't do it, she would kill him without mercy. On their way to Lemia, Misumi contacted Mio and told her and Tomoe to occupy Kailanan with the help of all the volunteers and soldiers, and to appoint a replacement for him at the academy. Mio and Tomoe were thrilled to hear that Misumi was completely dependent on them for his missions. They immediately returned to the academy and gathered the army, telling the Highland Orcs and Mist Lizards that Misumi had personally recommended that these soldiers join the army because of their great experience in combat. After a rousing speech from Tomoe, the army prepared to fight in Misumi's name. Led by Mio and Tomoe, the army marched forward, where Mio checked the number of demons in Kailanan and decided to move herself inside the fortress to get a better view. Tomoe went to guard the Silver Gate and told the rest of the troops to prepare for battle. After the two girls disappeared, the Orc and Lizardman commanders ordered their armies to advance with all their might and not to underestimate the number of demons. The first attack on Kailanan began, during which Misumi's army showed unrivaled courage and strength and managed to breach the fortress. At the same time, Mio infiltrated the most dangerous place in Kailanan, reaching the Chamber of Lift, a giant dragon that serves the Demon King directly. But Mio was brave and did not fear him, and even told him that she would finish him off and give him as a gift to her master, Misumi. At that time, Misumi was still on his way with Shiki to Lemia, and of course he was excited to meet the heroes again. Back in Kailanan, the orcs have managed to destroy the enemy's main force and are beginning to move on to clearing Kailanan of them completely. Things weren't so great for Mio, who couldn't defeat Lift, who was not only a huge dragon, but was smart enough to analyze all of Mio's attacks and, of course, was able to block them. But he had a very important question: why Mio kept repeating the same attack every time, even though she knew it would fail. Mio told him that she was using the same fighting technique that was in her master's memories, and since then she had only used that technique. The fight continued after that brief discussion, and Mio tried to break through Lift's armor, which reversed the attack and hit Mio again, telling her that he could repeat the same thing thousands of times without any fatigue. But what Lift didn't realize was that Tomoe, who was protecting the gate, knew that if Mio was trying to master Lift's reversal, she would easily defeat him. Tomoe, who was envious of Mio because she had finally found a strong rival, was busy cutting off all supply routes to Kailanan by digging a trench around the entire place. We go back to the Imperial capital, where Rona is there, anxiously listening to the news of the approaching demon forces. Sophia enters, marveling at Rona's bravery in going there by herself, and asks her what news she has. Rona told her that Tomoki, the hero of the Empire, has a strange flaw. He fights better at night than during the day, as his healing power only works in the presence of the moon. All of this news was of little value, as the first master's purpose was to eliminate the champion of Lemia. However, Rona began to worry after learning that Princess Layla had managed to return to her army after being in Rothsgard. After that quick meeting, Sophia personally went to fight Tomoki, who was shocked to learn that he would be facing Sophia the Dragon Slayer herself. When Tomoki tried to use his eye magic, he couldn't control Sophia, who told him that his weak magic wouldn't work on her. So Tomoki had to use his spear to try and defeat her after she promised to become his queen if he defeated her. Sophia arrogantly went to stab Tomoki, who used his mud trick magic, which put Sophia in a bind after she was trapped in a mud mold. Tomoki tells his assistants Jinaibai and Mura to stay on guard because Sophia is full of surprises. Tomoki used his maximum magic power and used several elements and combined them together before delivering a direct blow to Sophia. From the force of the blow, everyone could see its powerful impact from a great distance. Tomoki then began to taunt Sophia, saying that he wanted to make her his own, but now she would never be alive again. Before he could finish his taunt, he was surprised to find Sophia alive and unscathed. Sophia tells him that he uses powerful magic, but without any intelligence. She immediately began to viciously attack Tomoki and his assistants distance and threw them all to the ground. She taunted Tomoki and threw him into the air before stabbing him again with her sword in full view of his two friends, who also took their share of beatings. But Tomoki's healing mana was really strong and he was able to stand up again, but he asked Sophia to send his friends away before he could show her his true power. Sophia sent them away and waited for Tomoki to use the teacher's protection power, but he told her that's not his real power. His power is a terrifying fire that no one can imagine. Tomoki used his superpower to cause a massive explosion that shook the earth and created a massive crater. Unfortunately, Sophia escaped unscathed, leaving Tomoki to fight him again. Sophia then contacted Rona and told her what Tomoki had done. We then go to Stella's castle, which was sorely missing its hero Islangan, since after losing him, no one could defend them. So Hibiki tells them that they should retreat immediately because it's a losing battle, even as some of the commanders objected to the decision to retreat. Hibiki insisted that all citizens be withdrawn from in front of the demons and immediately begin the mandatory retreat procedure. But before any of them could move from their places, Iwa, the demon commander, arrived and vowed to wipe out Hibiki without mercy. Hibiki immediately prepared for the unthinkable, but the leaders told Hibiki that it wouldn't be a fair fight and that they'd better run away before Iwa kills them. So Iwa made himself clear to Hibiki and told her that she had a choice: run away and let the demons consume what was left of her people, or accept the fight no matter what the outcome. Hibiki chose to continue the fight and began to use her sword imbued with wind magic with the help of the other commanders, who provided her with great mana, and Hibiki struck with all her might. Shockingly, Iwa's gloves were imbued with the 4 elements and he was able to block the blow with ease, before delivering the final punch to finish Hibiki off. At that moment, the superhero Misumi, who was wearing a costume that hid his features so that no one would recognize him, appeared and managed to block the blow at the last moment. After he blocked the blow, everyone including Iwa stood shocked and none of them recognized Misumi, not even Hibiki, who was once his girlfriend. After Misumi rescues Hibiki, Hibiki is surprised that she doesn't recognize her rescuer and asks him if he's on their side or if he has a score to settle with Iwa. Upon hearing her voice, Misumi was also surprised, as he couldn't figure out why she was in this world. But before Misumi could come up with any logical solution, Iwa interrupted him and told him to go away because he had no intention of fighting against him. Of course, Misumi didn't listen to that advice, and Iwa immediately launched his first attack, delivering powerful blows to Misumi, who managed to catch Iwa's first 2 fists. Before Iwa could land a surprise blow, Misumi flew into the air and out of Iwa's striking range. This strategy impressed Iwa, who decided to continue his fight against Misumi without even knowing who he was. Hibiki tried to intervene to help Misumi, but Shiki, who was also in disguise, appeared and told her that she should leave his teacher alone because any help would do him more harm than good. While Shiki was recounting his adventures, 2 other demons arrived to finish off Shiki, Hibiki, and the other leaders while clearing the way for their leader to finish off Misumi. However, Shiki soon stood as an impenetrable barrier to the demons' attempts to kill them, and a sub-battle began in Stella's castle. Contrary to expectations, Shiki was strong, despite his funny appearance and his words that indicate the mentality of a failed fighter, but he managed to destroy the 2 demons quickly. At the same time, the main battle began and Misumi began to explore his new suit, where he began to experiment with the weapons attached to the suit. And the first weapon he tried was the explosive balls, but they did not have much effect on Iwa, who quickly dodged them. Misumi then used a grappling hook to grab Iwa's head before delivering a powerful blow with his hand that hit him hard. Misumi then flew through the air before delivering a tight kick to Iwa's face, who finally began to stagger before Misumi told him that this was the perfect time to retreat. But Iwa screamed at the top of his lungs to motivate the other demons and tell them to do his bidding. Of course, Misumi asks Iwa where he learned the technique, and Iwa tells him that he learned it from Navel, the hero's girlfriend. Iwa threatened Misumi that his men would wipe out all humans without mercy. Iwa used Navel's power to consume his soul in exchange for unparalleled superhuman strength. Once fully transformed, he told Misumi that he was now ready to continue the fight. But first he created a barrier around Hibiki and the leaders to prevent them from going to save the people of the city. Hibiki asked Shiki to get them out quickly, but Shiki handled it wisely and told her that he would not let the demons kill the people, but that she must first destroy the barrier herself, otherwise she would not be worthy of leading the war against the demons and would not be a true leader. Immediately after hearing those words, Hibiki began to try to break the magic barrier, but she fell to the ground after losing her strength. Just as she was about to give up in front of the magical barrier, she remembered what happened when she was promoted to hero. That's when she decided to choose her superpower to draw strength from the feelings of others. Hibiki woke up again after those memories and pulled out all the emotions around her: fear, anticipation, and hope. She used all of her energy in one final blow to the barrier, completely destroying it before she fell to the ground after using almost all of her power. But she was able to get up quickly to save her city, and Misumi also asked his friend Shiki to go with them to protect the city before it was completely destroyed. Misumi then prepared again to resume his fight with Iwa, who was determined to destroy Misumi this time after using the power of the navel. But then Misumi realized that his only hope of winning that fight was to destroy that navel spell. Misumi kept looking for a rose emblem until he saw it on Iwa's shoulder, and Misumi quickly launched a quick, powerful, lightning-fast attack on Iwa's shoulder and broke the talisman. Aiwa is shocked at the loss of the power he was counting on for the rest of the battle, and Misumi sarcastically asks him if he intends to continue this battle or if he's going to quit as usual. But before Misumi could finish his sarcasm, Sophia herself arrived to continue the fight. As soon as she arrived, she delivered a powerful blow with her spear that knocked off half of Misumi's face cover and told him that she knew Aiwa wouldn't be able to finish him off, so she came herself to complete the task. Sophia's encounter with Misumi was very strange. Misumi was flattered that she still remembered him, but asked her why she was still alive, as he thought the great magician had gotten rid of her. In an unintentional slip of the tongue, Sophia marveled that after all this time, Misumi still hadn't realized that he was the Grand Wizard. Misumi then asked Sophia why she was fighting him since he wasn't even the champion of the kingdom, but Sophia told him that he was a huge obstacle in her path, and she had to get rid of him before anything else. However, before the start of this highly anticipated fight, Rona finally arrived and was amazed that Misumi was in the fight. Misumi tried to explain his position to everyone, but Sophia was frustrated that Misumi was still carrying out the wishes of the Grandmasters. Rona tried to make a new deal with Misumi, asking him to leave the city, and in return she would guarantee to keep the humans out of the castle. Misumi refused, telling him he would fight to the last moment, even if she joined Sophia and Aiwa. Before Rona can marvel at Misumi's boldness and arrogance, Aiwa warns her that it's not just arrogance out of pride, but out of experience. Misumi's strength is beyond anything he's ever seen before, even destroying the naval spell. As soon as Sophia and Rona heard the spell, Rona scolded him for missing an opportunity to use the spell with power, but Aiwa again warned her against a war pit against Misumi. Sophia immediately began to attack Misumi, but this time she used her stealth power so that Misumi wouldn't know where she was attacking from. But Misumi had learned his lesson from his last war with Sophia and fortified himself with his magic, which prompted Sophia to reappear, and launched another attack, this time using the power of dark magic and a sharp sword blade. But this time, Misumi's armor easily blocked the blow. Sophia couldn't believe her eyes as Misumi was able to transform his mana into a physical armor that could easily block Sophia's dragon power blows. Then it was Misumi's turn to attack, and he landed a powerful punch to Sophia, who was able to dodge it. Sophia then began to use the power of the dragons one after another, but all of them failed in front of Misumi's impenetrable armor. It was only then that Sophia understood that this armor is not only strong in defense, but also strong in attack, as Misumi shot many projectiles at her, but she managed to escape all of them with great strength and speed. Aiwa tried to participate in the battle, but Misumi warned him that he would be eliminated if he tried to attack. Sophia then told him that she had managed to extract the power of 4 dragons, all greater than each other, and that it was the perfect time to use that power. Sophia transformed into a monstrous beast with claws and started a surprise attack on Misumi's armor, and managed to weaken a large part of it and knock some of the mana down, which is a great victory for her in this particular circumstance. Aiwa is encouraged and decides to launch a quick attack from behind Misumi, who easily recognizes the attack and grabs Aiwa by the neck and swings him high into the air before giving him a final warning that if he gets involved in the fight again, he'll be eliminated without warning. To put Aiwa a little further away from the fight, he landed a rocket punch that knocked him out, and Aiwa learned his lesson the hard way. Sophia tried to take advantage of Misumi's distraction and began to weaken his armor again, but Misumi had another surprise up his sleeve as he was able to quickly rebuild his armor. He grabbed Sophia by the head and unleashed a barrage of fire that knocked her to the ground, screaming and unable to get up. Outside Stella's castle, Hibiki was still fighting alongside Shiki and the rest of the commanders, and they were starting to make a lot of progress. Suddenly, a giant dragon appeared in the city. Of course, the leaders thought it was an ordinary dragon that would be easy to stop. However, only Shiki recognized it as the great dragon Lancer, who had recently joined the demon forces in this battle. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Misumi was in complete control of the fight until Rona herself realized that Misumi was going to kill Sophia, so she told him to leave that battle and she wouldn't ask him for any more missions. Sophia didn't accept this defeat and decided to attack again, but this time, she was completely exhausted and started talking about the real kingdom champion she had met before that fight. That's when Misumi realized that the kingdom hero had taken control of her, as he usually does with his other victims. After Sophia made one last attack, Misumi easily blocked it and threw her to the ground before telling her that this would probably be her last chance before she was eliminated. At the same time, Shiki was in a fierce fight with Lancer before Lancer transformed into his human form to fight in his new form. Of course, it was at this point that Shiki knew he had to intervene more aggressively in what would be his last battle. Of course, Shiki immediately panicked at the sight of this fighter who would not hesitate to put Misumi in an unenviable position. So Shiki decides to try to stop the fighter, who unleashes a series of swords, hoping to finish Shiki off quickly. With great difficulty, Shiki manages to fend off the onslaught. At that moment, Hibiki appeared and asked Shiki to clear the clouds so that they could help him fight against Lancer. Shiki convinces her that he won't remove them to protect them from that battle, and promises to do everything he can to defeat Lancer. At that moment, Lancer interrupted them and told them that this discussion would be useless as he would start using his true power to kill them all quickly. At that moment, Lancer showed his magic swords and began to prepare for the fight. After his powerful attack, Lancer was surprised as Shiki was able to block all all of his blows and his swords were easily broken. Shiki then told him that with the help of Lotto, the Dragon Lord, he was able to do a complete research on him. Shiki then drew his magic sword, which he called the Dragon Slayer, and prepared to finish off Lancer with it. But Lancer began to taunt Shiki for trying to fight one of the greatest dragons with just a magic sword, even without a polished blade. But once the battle began, Lancer realized that this sword was much more powerful than he expected, as Shiki's sword destroyed all of Lancer's swords and even hit his hand so hard that he fell to the ground. But of course, Lancer was stubborn, so he summoned all the swords of his masters and fired them at Shiki, who was able to block this attack with ease. So Shiki was able to skillfully manage the battle until Lancer eliminated one of Hibiki's assistants to join his sword and continue the fight. But at that moment, Shiki attacked him with all his energy and managed to finish him off. But his disguise was ruined and everyone was shocked that Shiki was actually a normal human with all that energy due to his training. Before Shiki goes to rest after that exhausting battle, he heals the fighter that Lancer killed and brings him back, only to be told by the fighter that he owes him his life and that he will return the favor someday. Back to Misumi's fight against Sophia, who suddenly started laughing loudly, which of course piqued Misumi's curiosity, so he asked her why she was laughing. She tells him that she made a bet with Lancer that if he died before her, she would get the rest of his life and power, and after Shiki finished him off, she would get the rest of the power of a dragon of Lancer's size as well as her own. Misumi immediately finds himself in a strange place called the Prison of Swords, a place filled with swords that are the life and power of Sophia herself. So Misumi took out his bow and arrow and immediately started destroying all those swords, which of course infuriated Sophia, and she quickly tried to stop him, but she couldn't stop him. Misumi then directed all of his bow attacks at Sophia's body and shot arrows at her and almost finished her off, so he said goodbye to her before shooting his last arrow. Sophia suddenly pulled out a Japanese magic sword and destroyed that arrow, and told Misumi that she didn't mind risking anything to save her own life. After realizing the power of her Japanese sword, Sophia attacks Misumi and manages to destroy the armor that had protected him from all previous attacks. Misumi knew he had to change his strategy or Sophia would defeat him that way, so he shot a first arrow that blocked Sophia's view, who immediately rushed to where Misumi had been before. Suddenly, Misumi threw himself under Sophia and shot 2 arrows with full force, completely eliminating Sophia, who didn't even have a chance to defend herself. After eliminating Sophia, Misumi was so happy to free the castle that he had nothing left of his agreement with Rona but to free the fortress. So Misumi stood up, grabbed his bow, and fired a super arrow that hit his enemies without even seeing them, thus fulfilling all that Rona had asked of him. He let himself fall as usual after successfully accomplishing the task, having grown accustomed to it. When Misumi returns to the castle, Shiki is waiting for him, and Misumi tells him that he has successfully completed the mission and is already acquainted with Hibiki, the heroine of the kingdom, so they have to return to their city. After Misumi reassures the Lemia kingdom that their heroine is Hibiki. After the Battle of Lemia, Misumi has no reason to stay there, so he returns to his city to find the entire city's armies greeting him after they, too, managed to achieve an impressive victory over the demons and mutants. The Orc and Lizardman commanders also informed him that they had emerged from the battle without any significant losses or fatalities. Mio then told him about her battle against Lift, who was swinging his spear so much that Mio began to eat it, which increased her strength in an unprecedented way, so much so that she finished her meal with Lift himself after she pounced on him. Tomoe then asked Misumi how the fighting in Lemia was going, and he told her that he was able to achieve a crushing victory with the help of Shiki. Misumi then ended the meeting as he needed to get some rest. However, the headmaster of the academy sent for help as some monsters were still fighting in the city. When Shiki and Mundo heard the news, they rushed to the monsters that posed no problem for them and began to eliminate them one by one. After all that fighting, Misumi had to face Tomoe's bad mood as she couldn't satisfy her pride in that battle as she didn't take part in any fierce fighting. But Misumi won her over by telling her that he still favored her over 1,000 dragon soldiers, which made her blush and forget everything that had happened. Of course, that wasn't the end of the battles, as the battle left a lot of damage, especially to the Merchants Guild and the Academy, so Misumi himself supervised the rebuilding of the city and did not allow anyone to neglect his work. He also told them that classes at the Academy would be closed for some time until the city recovered. Misumi was inundated with job offers. First, Misumi turned down the opportunity to become a permanent teacher at the Academy because he didn't intend to make a living that way. Then Misumi met Isteel, who had promised to tell her boss about him. Shockingly, her boss was Rambidant himself, a merchant captain who was also in the nightclub business. Of course, Rambidant was embarrassed to see Misumi and told him he could offer him any job he wanted, but Misumi refused. He even told Rambidant that he benefited the most from the wars. His business would be involved in the reconstruction of the city, and he would be paid handsomely for it. Only then, for the first time, did Rambidant admit to Misumi that he might not be a great merchant, but he was a smart and observant boy. But Misumi didn't care much for those compliments and went back to his home. We returned to Sophia, who was exhausted and on the verge of death after being soundly defeated by Misumi. Suddenly, Suddenly, she heard a strange sound nearby, so she got up to see what danger had come to her this time. To her shock, the heavy guest this time was Lotto himself, the greatest dragon in the world. Sophia stood in front of him and told him that she would take him down with ease. But Lotto told her the bitter truth that it was his own creation. Once upon a time, Lotto mixed his blood with human blood and created two dragon-like warriors, Sophia and Lancer. Sophia herself is a product of Lotto and has no chance in her fight against him. When Sophia even tried to raise her sword against Lotto, Lotto took away all her power and left her on the ground, lamenting that this would be the end of her after all her adventures. Before she could go any further, Lotto ended her life forever. We return to Rona and Iowa, who were still bitter after the battle ended with the demon armies defeated without even coming out of the battle with a castle under their control. But Rona still had plans, so she told Iowa to continue training his demon troops to prepare for the next invasion. She also decided to have Misumi, the self-proclaimed Grand Magician, meet the Grandmaster. At that time, Misumi shared with all the people of his city the celebration after the end of that anguish. He told them that even if they got into trouble again, they would be able to withstand the attacks. Immediately, loud celebrations began while Misumi refused to think about anything for the time being. Tomoe's happiness was indescribable after the successive storms that had hit the kingdoms subsided, and she shared her relief with Shiki, who was also relieved. Mio took advantage of the calm and asked Misumi if he remembered the promise he made to her that he would do anything for her if she performed honorably in this war. Mio's request was strange and Misumi didn't understand it at first, but Mio corrected her and told him that she wanted him to teach her how to make fried rice. In order not to demoralize Misumi's students, Misumi praised them all and told them that he was grateful to all of them for their strong participation in the wars and for protecting his store all this time. Finally, he told them that without their help, he wouldn't have been able to achieve such excellent results. This made everyone feel very happy.